And please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story. I never thought dating could feel like being stuck in some weird maze, but the night I met Hashim, it started off like one of those summer evenings where the air feels thick and everything feels possible. We were at this small outdoor market near the river, with food stalls lined up and music playing way too loud, but in a good way. I had been wandering around alone after school, mostly bored, and he kind of drifted in like he was already part of the whole scene. We talked about random stuff like which stalls looked sketchy and how the river smelled like wet socks, and for that moment, it felt normal. The second time we hung out, we met at this coffee spot that had those tiny tables where your knees slammed together if you moved too fast. I remember thinking how funny it was that he kept adjusting his chair like he was trying to find the perfect angle. Nothing seemed strange until he suddenly shifted the topic toward trust. He talked about how real trust meant giving each other full access to everything. He said relationships were built on total transparency, and before I could even process it, he dropped this curveball where he wanted my phone passwords, bank login, and anything else that felt like a boundary. I almost choked on my drink, but I kept quiet waiting for him to laugh or say he was joking. He never did. I tried to say that everyone needs their own space, not because of secrets, but because it just makes sense. He stared at his coffee like he was trying to read a hidden message in the foam. Then he calmly told me that if I said no, he would end it right there. No halfway, no discussion. It was strange how quiet the cafe felt, like the music cut out even though it didn't. I nodded because I panicked. I told him I would think about it, and he said thinking was already a sign of doubt. After that day, everything turned into this slow slide into weird territory. When we hung out, he constantly asked if I had made up my mind. He kept bringing up stories of couples who shared everything like he found them in some secret club online. The more he talked, the more uncomfortable I felt. He even hinted that maybe I was hiding things if I didn't just hand the information over. It got in my head for a while. I would go home and stare at my phone like it was contraband. I would check my bank app like someone was watching. One afternoon, we met up at a park near the old train tracks where kids used to dare each other to walk on the beams. He showed up holding his phone already open to some note he wrote, listing everything he wanted from me. He explained how easy it would be. He could help me manage my stuff, keep me safe, and prevent mistakes. I asked him what mistakes he was talking about. He said people make poor choices without guidance. I honestly felt like I was in the middle of a job interview I never applied for. The thing that pushed me over happened when he randomly grabbed my phone while I was unlocking it to check the time. He didn't get in because the screen locked too fast, but he shook his head like I had disappointed him. He repeated that trust should be instant, not something earned. I didn't know how to explain to him that trust meant different things to different people. Every time I tried to set any boundary, he twisted it back like I was trying to hide something from him. The pressure started leaking into school and home. I found myself getting distracted in class thinking about what would happen if I stood up to him. My friends noticed I was quieter and asked why I kept checking my pockets. I wouldn't tell them anything, mostly because I didn't want to hear their reactions. It felt embarrassing to even admit someone had this kind of control over my brain without actually having anything from me. One late evening, we sat by the river on a bench facing the water. The current looked slow, and the streetlights reflected on the surface like melted gold. He asked me again, and this time he gave me a deadline. By the end of the week, he wanted everything. He said if we were serious, then nothing should be private. My stomach felt like it folded into itself. The moment I got home, I sat in my bed staring at my lock screen. I wondered how I got stuck here after only 2 dates. I realized I barely knew this guy. I didn't know his favorite food, where he actually lived, or why his whole identity revolved around control. Every time we met, it felt like he was inspecting me instead of getting to know me. The more I thought about it, the weirder it felt. I remembered how calm he was whenever he talked about access, almost like he trained for this. The next morning, I decided that I needed to do something. I texted him and told him I couldn't give him what he wanted. I told him I didn't even share stuff like that with family. He responded fast, like he had already typed the message. He said we were done and that he hoped I found someone who liked secrets. He blocked me 2 minutes later. I stared at the screen for a while, feeling a weird mix of relief and confusion. The following week, I saw him at the market again. He walked past me like I was invisible. Part of me expected him to say something, but he didn't even blink. I guess that was his way of showing he moved on to the next possible candidate. I wondered how many others had gone through the same script. Looking back, I kept imagining what would have happened if I gave in. I pictured him scrolling through every message, watching every purchase, maybe even sitting in his room analyzing every tiny thing I did. The thought alone made me want to throw my phone in the river. I also realized that no matter how someone frames it, forcing access is not trust. Trust shows up when someone respects what you keep to yourself. I eventually told my friends everything after school one day behind the gym. They stared at me like I just told them aliens landed on the roof. They told me that was messed up and I should never feel cornered like that again. I felt better letting the words out instead of keeping them locked up. I never heard from Hashim again, and I didn't go looking. Sometimes I walk by that old coffee spot and think about that moment. I still sit at those tiny tables, except now I pick the bigger one when I can. Feels nice to stretch my legs without someone judging the angle. I changed my passwords anyway, just because it helped clear the mental space he took up. Now the whole thing feels like a weird chapter in a book I read a long time ago. Nothing dramatic, just something that shaped how I see boundaries. I still go to the market, I still hang out by the river, but now I pay more attention to the people who asked for more than they deserve. Maybe that's all that stuck with me. The first time I met Fahima, I was actually trying to dodge this group project meeting in school. I ended up sitting outside behind the gym, just kicking gravel around and thinking about food even though lunch had passed ages ago. She walked up like she already knew me, holding this weird smoothie that was almost glowing purple. She said the cafeteria was selling them for $3, and she dared me to try it, then watched my face like I was some kind of science test. For some reason, we clicked in that awkward way where you both pretend the other person is way funnier than they really are. We swapped numbers and started texting after that. Our first date was simple. We met in front of this corner shop near my street that has that buzzing fridge that never gets fixed. We grabbed chips and sodas, and sat on the sidewalk talking about random junk, like how some people eat pizza with a fork, and how the playground swings squeak louder than they used to. It felt harmless and pretty chill. She talked about her interests and how she wanted to do something big with her life, though she never gave specifics. I just nodded, eating my chips, thinking it was cool that someone had goals. The second time we hung out, we went to this park by the small skate ramps. It was noisy, kids yelling, bikes screeching, but she didn't seem bothered. She started talking about what she pictured for the future. She said she saw herself traveling, buying fancy clothes, and living in a cool apartment in the city. I asked what she planned to work as, and she just shrugged, saying she would focus on her dreams once she found someone who really believed in her. I thought she meant emotionally, so I didn't think too much about it. As time went on, she started hinting at this idea that in a relationship, the guy should support the girl completely. At first, I assumed she meant emotional support, like cheering each other on. Then she got more direct. She said working stressed her out, and she thought her energy was better saved for imagining ideas. She would talk about how couples should be one unit, but the way she said it felt like she meant one unit controlled by her. The night everything got weird, we went to this small diner near the train station. It was loud with plates clanking, and the lights were kind of yellowish, making everyone look a little tired. She started talking about how she always pictured being with someone who would take care of all the bills. I sipped my drink and nodded, but then she leaned forward and said she wanted me to quit my job. She didn't like that I was tired after shifts, and she said it got in the way of me focusing on us. She wanted me to take any savings I had and support her dream full time. I tried asking what the dream actually was, and she said something about being an online fashion icon, buying expensive outfits, and traveling everywhere. She said once she was famous, she would pay me back. The whole thing sounded like a plot someone wrote on a napkin 5 minutes before a deadline. I remember walking home that night, my head buzzing. I was still in school. I barely made enough at my job to pay for small stuff like snacks or games every now and then. The idea of quitting sounded insane. The next few days after that, she kept texting, asking if I had thought about it. It felt like she was waiting outside my brain tapping her foot. When I said I needed time, she said time was a sign that my devotion was weak. I felt trapped, like a bug under a cup. The strange part was she refused to work. She said jobs drained creativity and relationships demanded full financial devotion. She talked about how she deserved to be spoiled because she had big ideas. She even started pointing out clothes online that she wanted, saying I could start by buying small things to show effort. One time she sent a link to a jacket costing $70 and told me it would be a symbol of loyalty. I stared at my phone, imagining my bank app crying. We met again at this walkway behind the mall where people go to smoke or hide from teachers. She came with this little notebook where she wrote down her wish list of things she wanted me to buy eventually. She spoke like it was a signed deal already. I tried explaining that I couldn't afford anything like that, and she just shook her head slowly, saying love requires sacrifice. She said she didn't want to date someone who lacked ambition to support her greatness. She wanted a partner who would focus on her dream and not get distracted by work. My brain hurt thinking about it. She made it sound almost romantic, like giving everything would prove we were connected. She even pointed out couples online who did similar stuff, though I'm pretty sure those people had actual plans. I started sleeping less, thinking about whether I was being selfish for not helping. She had this way of making me feel guilty without yelling. She just layered her words, one guilt brick at a time. One afternoon, I was working a shift at the small grocery store near my neighborhood. She showed up unexpectedly, leaning against the counter, giving me that half smile that somehow felt more like pressure. She reminded me that every hour I worked was an hour I should have been planning her lifestyle. She said customers drained my genius. I scanned items for this older guy while trying not to roll my eyes. After she left, I kept thinking about how weird it was she never once asked what I wanted. Our messages got heavier. She sent me paragraphs about what the future would be like, me paying for trips, new outfits, rent, fancy dinners. She said she knew I would take care of everything if I loved her. When I asked what she would bring to the relationship, she responded with creativity and inspiration. When I asked what that meant, she sent a selfie with sparkly filters. I tried avoiding her for a bit. At school, she cornered me behind the building, telling me that love required devotion. She said if I really cared, I would quit my job at the end of the week. She even grabbed my hand dramatically like we were being filmed. My stomach twisted because I realized she wasn't joking. She genuinely believed this was normal. After that conversation, I spent 2 days thinking about everything. I pictured myself throwing away my job, draining my money, and watching her scroll through outfits online while I sat there broke and confused. I pictured trying to explain this to my parents, who would probably ground me into dust. I pictured not buying anything for myself ever again. It felt like my future shrunk into a tiny box with glitter glued on top. I decided I needed to end it. I texted her and asked to meet near the field behind school. She showed up wearing sunglasses like she was already famous. I told her I couldn't quit my job. I told her I couldn't support someone financially when I was barely standing on my own. Her face froze like she just bit into a lemon. She said she guessed I was not ready for greatness. She said I was boring. Then she walked away without looking back. The weird part was how light I felt walking home. I checked my wallet later and realized just how little I had, and how fast it would have vanished if I kept going. Over the next week, she started dating some other guy, probably pitching the same dream. I saw them walking through the hallway, her holding his arm while talking about vacations. Sometimes I see her scrolling her phone between classes, planning lists and outfits she will never buy. She glances at me like I'm a missed opportunity, but honestly, I'm glad I dodged whatever that was. Now I still work my job, even if it makes me tired sometimes. I use my money for stuff I actually care about, like snacks, games, and saving up for shoes that don't fall apart. I figured out that support in a relationship should go both ways, not drain one person's life. I still hang around behind the gym sometimes, but now I sit there laughing with my friends instead of stressing over demands. Maybe someday she will find someone who shares her dream, or maybe she will finally get a job and realize how expensive life is. Either way, I'm out of it. Whenever I think back, it feels like I read a strange comic about someone living in fantasy mode. I still avoid glowing purple smoothies though. I was not even planning to date anyone when I met Jude. It happened on a random afternoon after school when everyone was hanging around the parking lot for no reason. The sky was kind of gray, the air smelled like the cafeteria fries, and people kept tossing the ball around even though no one really cared where it landed. I was scrolling on my phone when Jude slid into the conversation like he had been there the whole time. He laughed loud, tapped shoulders, and talked like he already knew all of us. I noticed he watched who reacted to him and how like he was keeping score inside his head. We exchanged numbers after someone suggested grabbing snacks at the corner shop. He walked next to me as if we had been friends forever. He talked about how most relationships were fake, how people pretended to care, how loyalty was dying. I listened. Something about the way he spoke made everything sound dramatic, even though we were just walking between parked cars. Later that night, he texted for hours, telling stories about drama in his old school, always ending with how everyone betrayed everyone. I should have seen the pattern. I just thought he liked talking. Our first date was at a little pizza place that smelled like melted cheese and old receipts. We sat in a booth near the window. He asked about my friends, what they were like, how long I knew them. He asked what I talked about with them and how much they knew about personal stuff. He said it casually, but every question stacked on the next like bricks. I answered without thinking too much, just telling random stories. He nodded like he was digging through those words with a tiny shovel. By the second date, he started slipping comments about how friendships distract people. We were sitting on these steps behind the library, watching birds fight over crumbs. He said if someone really cared about their partner, it would not need outside voices messing everything up. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He did not laugh back. After that, he slowly tested how much time I spent with other people. If I said I was hanging out with friends, he would ask what we did, how long, and what things we talked about. He said he just wanted to know me. He said people with too many friends could get pulled in the wrong direction. He said couples should be like a sealed box. One Friday after school, we met near the basketball court, where sneakers squealed on pavement and kids argued about falls that never happened. Jude leaned against a fence, talking about how crowded friendships clouded judgment. He said partners should be each other's only social circle. I joked that I would go insane with only one person to talk to. He did not smile. He stared like I missed something obvious. He started asking me to cancel plans with other people. Small stuff at first. He said he felt left out. Then he said he felt disrespected. Eventually, it turned into to not hang out with them. I remember sitting in my room staring at my group chat, typing excuses that felt too long, my thumbs hovering over send. My chest felt tight each time I pulled back from them. The more I pulled away, the more he seemed pleased. He praised me for being focused and loyal. He said our connection was stronger than anything. He sent paragraphs about how other people weaken bonds. He tapped into this weird guilt, making me feel wrong for wanting to talk to anyone else. He painted every hangout as potential betrayal. It was like watching someone erase parts of a picture and convincing you the empty spaces were cleaner. One day he asked if I could block certain people. He had reasons for every name. He said one person influenced me too much. Another person was jealous of us. Another just wanted attention. I felt my circle shrinking. I blocked 2 people because I was tired of the arguments. I told myself it was temporary. Things got awkward with my closest friend when I stopped showing up at lunch. He came looking for me behind the gym, asking if something happened. I shrugged and said I was busy, but I was not busy. I was sitting on a bench with Jude while he explained why my best friend was holding me back. He said my friend talked too much and made me think about things I should not think about. It sounded off, but the way he said it made me doubt my own judgment. At home, my parents noticed I stopped meeting my friends. I said school was stressful. I sat in my room scrolling through messages I never had answered. Unread notifications stacked up like dust. Eventually, people stopped trying. The silence felt weirdly heavy. Jude celebrated that quiet. He said it meant nobody controlled my attention but him. One afternoon, we walked behind the mall, where old posters peeled off walls and shipping trucks beeped in reverse. Jude suddenly asked if I could promise to cut off everyone completely. He said partners should be whole worlds for each other. He said if there was a gap between us, someone else could sneak in. The way he said it made me cold inside without showing it. He nodded, satisfied, and he held out his hand like we were sealing a deal. I remember going home and staring at my contacts list, just scrolling up and down in silence. I thought about birthdays, inside jokes, late-night calls, stuff that built slowly over years. Jude expected me to toss all of it like trash. I imagined a future where it was only him, always watching, always questioning. I imagined him deciding who I spoke to, who I waved to, who I texted. The picture made everything inside me feel tight. The next week got worse. Jude wanted proof. He started checking my phone screen when it lit up. He asked to see my messages. He said it calmly, like checking weather. When I hesitated, he looked disappointed, like I let him down in front of a crowd. He said if I loved him, I would not need anyone else. He said friends distract hearts. I wanted to argue, but he stacked his sentences so fast I could not catch my breath. I felt myself getting smaller. I walked quieter in hallways. I sat alone at lunch. People whispered about how I disappeared. I pretended not to notice. I caught glimpses of my old friend across the cafeteria. He waved once. I pretended to tie my shoes so I would not have to wave back. The breaking point came on a Wednesday after school. We sat at a park where someone had drawn chalk stars on the sidewalk. Jude pointed at my phone when it buzzed. It was a message from an old friend asking if I wanted to hang out. Jude's eyes narrowed. He said I needed to block them now. He said any hesitation was betrayal. He said loyalty without isolation was fake. I stared at the message, thumb hovering. Something inside me cracked. I pictured the version of myself from a few months before, laughing with a whole group of people, planning stupid jokes, yelling across the field. That person felt light. This version felt like a ghost stuck in an empty room. I told Jude I could not do it. I said I would not cancel the rest of my life. He stared at me for a long time, his jaw tightened. Then he stood up and said we were done. No discussion. He walked away without looking back, his footsteps fading into the sound of distant traffic. When I got home, I sat at my bed and scrolled through every old chat, read some memories I forgot. I unlocked people. A couple responded instantly. Some did not respond at all. I get it. Time moves and some doors close quietly. At school, my old friend found me near the lockers. He asked if I was okay. I said yeah, slowly. We walked to lunch together. The cafeteria noise felt louder than usual, but in a good way, like waking from a nap you stayed in too long. Every now and then I see Jude on campus. He always has someone new next to him, listening too closely, nodding too often. I wonder if they are slowly shrinking too. I spend more time with my group again, laughing at dumb things and arguing about nothing. I feel parts of myself coming back one piece at a time. It's weird how quiet control can be, how smooth it slides in. But I am done letting someone turn my world into a tiny box. I met George at a house hangout that smelled like old snacks and cheap air freshener. The music was low, people talked in corners, and someone kept dropping ice on the carpet like it was confetti. George stood by a window watching cars pass outside. He looked calm, the kind of calm that makes you think he is a deep thinker or something. We started talking about random school stuff, movies, and plans for the summer. He nodded a lot. I thought he was just listening hard. Later I found out nodding was his way of pretending he agreed with anything to keep the vibe smooth. We did not live together at first. Our places were small but cozy. Over time he spent more nights in mine. We never argued. People said we were lucky. Not arguing felt like winning. Back then I liked the idea of quiet peace. But years go by slow and heavy, and quiet starts to sound like nothing instead of peace. The first year was easy. We ate takeout, watched shows, and walked around town on warm nights. He always asked me what I wanted to watch. He always said he liked the same food I liked. I thought I found someone perfectly aligned with me. Friends joked we were clones. I laughed. Now I think about that word a lot. Clone. Year 2 rolled in and George started following my hobbies. I liked running, so we started running. I liked drawing, so he bought pencils. I started listening to older rock albums, and suddenly he read every fact about the bands. I assumed we were influencing each other. I thought it was cute. He never shared anything that was his own. I just did not notice. Around year 3, I realized I was choosing everything. Furniture, trips, movies, food, music. He always shrugged and said I know best. When I asked his opinion, he repeated mine back to me. Same words, same tone. It felt weird, but I ignored it. People change. Maybe he just trusted me. Friends got suspicious. They asked what hobbies were his. I could not answer. I said he liked everything I liked. They frowned. One friend asked if he ever invited me to something he discovered alone. I felt my chest tighten. I changed the subject. At home, I looked at George watching a show I chose. His face looked blank. Year 4 got heavy. We talked about moving into a bigger apartment together. Rent would be $1,300 a month. He agreed instantly. No hesitation. He asked which neighborhood, which paint colors, which curtains. I picked. He nodded. He never pushed back. When I messed up cooking dinner, he said it was fine. When I made plans he did not seem excited about, he said it was perfect. His voice was smooth like wallpaper. It covered cracks I could not see. At parties, people noticed he did not talk about his opinions. He just supported mine. They laughed about it behind our backs, I later learned. Someone asked him why he liked a certain movie. He looked at me, waited for my answer, and used it. They stared at him weird. He did not blink. By this point, I started feeling uncomfortable. A relationship is two voices. I felt like I was talking to a mirror. Sometimes I tested him. I said I liked something I actually hated. He said he loved it. My stomach dropped. I wondered how deep the copying went. Late one night, I could not sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed watching him scroll through his phone. He was looking up reviews for a show I pretended to enjoy. I whispered, asking what he liked about it. He started quoting stuff I said last week. Same words. Same little shrug at the end. My skin crawled. Year 5 felt like walking in fog. On our anniversary, we went to a small restaurant with dim lights and soft chairs. The food tasted fine, but something felt off. It was too quiet. The silence between us used to feel comfortable. Now it felt empty. I asked him what he wanted in life. He paused for a long time. Then he said he wanted what I wanted. That answer felt like cardboard. No flavor. No identity. Weeks later at home, something snapped. I came back from work, tired and hungry, and found him cleaning my bookshelves. He arranged everything based on my favorite order. He said he wanted to help me feel comfortable. I stared at the books. They felt like strangers. I asked him what books he liked most. He looked confused. He grabbed one and said he liked it because I liked it. I felt dizzy. That night, I asked him to sit with me on the couch. I told him something felt wrong. He looked nervous for the first time ever. His foot tapped on the carpet. The fan hummed overhead. The room smelled like leftover air and cold dinner. I asked if he had been pretending to like things. His face twitched. Then he nodded slowly. He said he started pretending on day 1. He thought matching me made things easier. He said conflict scared him. He said he never knew who he was and figured copying me solved that. He said people always left him unless he blended into their shape. He thought if he became a puzzle piece shaped exactly like me, I would never leave. My stomach felt heavy. I asked if he ever wanted to share his own tastes. He shrugged and said he forgot what they were. 5 years erased them. My heart hurt in a weird, numb way. I realized I loved someone who was not really there. I loved the shadow. I asked why he told me now. He said pretending got too heavy. He said waking up every day and waiting to see what he should be drained him. He said he was tired of looking at my face for answers to questions about himself. He said he wanted to breathe. We sat silent. Not peaceful silent. Heavy silent. He said he did care about me, just not in a way that let him be real. He never argued because arguing meant risking cracks. He never said no because no meant danger. He built a cage shaped like my preferences and lived inside it. That word live hit weirdly in my head. For hours, we sat on opposite ends of the couch. The glow of a lamp painted the room dull yellow. I thought about every movie, song, meal, trip, haircut, outfit, hobby, and plan. I wondered which choices were mine and which were just painted reflections. 5 years is a long time to play pretend. 5 years is long enough to forget the original face behind the mask. Eventually, I said I thought we should break up. My voice cracked a little. He did not fight. He did not ask why. He just nodded slowly. His eyes looked empty but relieved. Like a balloon losing air in a peaceful way. He packed some clothes, books he never cared about, and walked out quietly. The hallway air felt stale after the door clicked. I sat on the floor leaning against the couch. The silence pressed on me. 5 years vanished like fog burned off by sunlight. I tried to remember the early days, but all I saw was nodding. Over the next week, the apartment felt huge. I noticed how many decisions I made alone. I played music I actually liked. I ordered food I craved. I sat without waiting for someone to mirror me. My identity felt raw but real. Friends asked if I was okay. I said I was sorting things out. I thought about how easy it is to mistake agreement for connection. I thought about how pretending can look like love until you zoom in on the seams. A month later, I ran into him at a grocery store. He carried snacks I never liked. Colors I never picked. He looked nervous, but also different. He said he was trying to figure himself out. I nodded. That felt honest. We talked for a minute. Nothing deep. Just two people who shared 5 years and did not know each other. When we said goodbye, he smiled small. A real smile that walked out feeling strange, but clean. At home, I sat on my couch eating the food I actually wanted. I put on music, stretched my legs, and breathed like the room belonged to me again. It all started on a random Thursday after school when I was sitting on this old concrete bench by the bus stop. The paint was peeling off because people kept carving their names into it with keys. I was eating a sandwich that was falling apart in my hands while scrolling through my phone. That was when Chris sat down next to me like he had planned it. He said something about recognizing me from math class, even though I swear I had never seen him pay attention in there. He pointed at the birds fighting over crumbs and joked that they acted like kids during lunch rush. I laughed because it was true. He asked if I ever hung out around town and said we should get ice cream sometime. He talked slow and calm, which made me think he was just quiet. He did not seem weird at first, just thoughtful in a sort of quiet background way. His texts were a little long, but lots of people overshare when they first get comfortable. I told myself not to judge it. Our first date was at this tiny burger place near the train tracks. The tables were sticky, and the soda machine made this loud clunk every time you pushed it. We ate and talked about music and school. It felt normal. Every now and then, he would lean closer and repeat something I said, like he wanted to remember the exact wording. I just assumed it was his way of showing attention. When we walked home, he asked weirdly specific questions about things I said, like he was fact-checking me. I thought it was funny and moved on. The second time we met, we watched a movie in a little theater near the library. The popcorn machine there always smells burnt. After the movie, he asked how certain scenes made me feel, like he wanted a full breakdown. He asked why I described one character as annoying and what that said about my patience. It was strange, but he talked about it like he was studying philosophy, so I shrugged it off. It was the third date when things started slipping into strange territory. We walked around the shopping area, passing the buskers and cheap jewelry stands. He had his backpack with him, which was normal because lots of students carry them everywhere. Halfway down the street, his zipper was open a little, and inside I saw this tiny blinking red light. I stared at it for a second, then looked away. I thought it belonged to some random gadget like a portable charger or some Bluetooth thing. I did not want to accuse him of anything, so I ignored it. Later that night, he texted me paragraphs analyzing how I said certain sentences. He quoted exact lines I read earlier. At first, I thought he remembered weirdly well, but then he asked why I paused before answering when he asked about sports. I had no idea how he could have known the pause length. That was when the blinking red light crawled back into my mind. The fourth time we'd hung out, we sat at a picnic table in the park. I noticed he had the backpack again. This time the red light was peeking out more. Curiosity pulled at me hard. I pretended to tie my shoe and leaned to the side just enough to see it. A small recorder sat inside, propped against a stack of notebooks. My stomach dropped, but my face stayed still. I did not know how to react. I left that date early claiming homework. That night, he sent another detailed message breaking down how I phrased things. He said I sometimes sounded dismissive when I disagreed. He wrote like a teacher grading an essay. I stared at the screen, confused, angry, and oddly embarrassed. How long had he been recording me? What parts did he keep? Who else would hear them? The next day, I watched him closely. Everything I said, he repeated back in his head before responding. Sometimes he even asked me to explain the tone of my own words. He wanted to know why I sounded neutral instead of enthusiastic. He said neutral responses could signal future distance. He did not smile when I laughed. He watched my face the way coaches watch slow-motion clips of games. I realized he was not talking with me. He was studying me. His eyes tracked every movement. I imagined him sitting in his room alone, headphones on, replaying moments, and pausing to write notes. I wondered if he labeled audio files by date. I wondered if he made charts. The thought made my skin feel too tight. I decided to test something. I changed my tone randomly, lifting the end of a sentence, even though I did not mean it. His eyebrows twitched. He wrote it down. Confirmed. He listened not for meaning, but for patterns. After that, our dates got even stranger. We sat at a cafe near the back by a window. He positioned his backpack between us, pointed toward my face. I felt I was being interviewed by a documentary team that forgot to bring the crew. He asked about every friend I had. He asked how often I got angry. He asked why I used certain words. I gave short answers, trying not to reveal too much. Afterward, he texted that he would like me to speak softer next time. He said my tone sometimes sounded sharp. I stared at the message, wondering how deep the rabbit hole went. One weekend, he invited me to hang out near the museum lawn. We sat on the grass in a quiet patch while cars drove by. He kept glancing at his backpack like it held something precious. He asked why I had shifted positions twice while sitting. He said any fidgeting might signal discomfort in a relationship. He said that if I cared, I would be still. I wanted to walk home on the spot. Instead, I asked if something was in his bag. He froze for a second, then shook his head too fast. Later that night, he sent a message saying he felt our communication was slipping. He attached an audio clip of me laughing, pointing out how it sounded nervous. He said nervous laughter hinted at dishonesty. I stared at the screen in silence. My heart thudded slow and heavy. That audio clip proved everything. The next school day, I had avoided him. I ate lunch outside near the bleachers. He found me anyway. He sat down and asked why I had not responded to his analysis. He said improvement only works if both people participate. He wanted to know why I sat farther from him. He wanted to know why I seemed quieter. He wanted to know who I talked to for school. I said I was just tired. He wrote that down too. He was building a file on me, piece by piece. Not a fun scrapbook, but a case study. I imagined shelves full of recordings. I imagined him playing them late at night, pausing whenever I breathed wrong. The final straw happened at a diner near the edge of town. The lighting flickered and the waitress looked tired. We ordered fries and sat in the corner booth. His backpack sat on the seat next to him. Halfway through talking about school, I reached over, grabbed the bag, and opened it fast. Inside was a recorder already running. He reached for it like I had snatched his pet. I asked why it was recording. He said calm and slow that it helped him review our dates. He said analysis is how relationships grow. He said tone awareness prevents fights. My mind felt like static. He did not seem sorry. He seemed confused that I cared. I told him recording someone without asking is wrong. He said he thought it was polite because he was collecting data gently, not loudly. I almost laughed from how absurd his explanation sounded. I left the diner without finishing the fries. He texted paragraphs that night, saying reflection requires accuracy. He asked why I had raised my voice. He replayed the moment of my voice rising in his audio like a highlight clip. I blocked his number before reading further. For days after, I felt paranoid. I looked around corners. I checked backpacks. I lowered my voice on instinct. My friends noticed I was quieter. I said I was fine. I did not want to explain how exhausting it is to be examined like a lab frog. I found out from someone in math class that Chris writes down conversations with lots of people. They thought it was quirky. Maybe they never dated him long enough. Maybe they never saw the red light. A week later, he passed me in the hallway. He did not smile. He just looked at me like he was scanning my face for something missing. I looked away. I did not want to give him another data point. Slowly, the paranoia faded. I started talking normally again, laughing without thinking about how it sounded on tape. I reminded myself that not every sentence is a puzzle piece. Sometimes people just talk because it is fun. I still sit at that old bench near the bus stop sometimes, but now I check backpacks around me without needing to. I guess some habits stick. I never read any messages from him again. I am not a recording. I am not homework. Relationships do not need microphones. The weird thing about how I met Mrnightmare is that it felt like one of those days where nothing should have happened. It was a boring Tuesday, sky all plain and washed out, and I stayed after school because I missed the bus on purpose. I was sitting near the vending machines, staring at the buttons like they were going to tell my future. She walked over holding this giant binder like it weighed more than a grown cat. She said something about how the vending machine snacks had terrible ingredient ratios, and she rattled off numbers like she was reading from a manual. I kind of laughed, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't laughing at all. Somehow we ended up talking about random topics like how people cross streets wrong. She talked serious about everything. Our first actual date was at this small sandwich shop downtown with ugly wallpaper from the early 2000s. It looked like they never changed anything since opening. We sat near the window and she kept watching everyone who walked by. She had this intense stare like she was protecting a secret base. We ate slowly and she asked me if I thought the world was dangerous. I shrugged, saying you should look both ways and not stick forks in outlets. She nodded like I just confirmed her entire worldview. The second time we hung out, she brought papers. She said she found out I liked to walk around town sometimes, going to the bakery or the park. She leaned close and started talking about how accidents happen when partners are alone. She listed statistics about bike crashes and weird news stories from other countries. She told me she believed relationships require supervision for safety. I blinked at her for a full 5 seconds. It sounded like she was planning to become my security guard. A few days after that, she texted that she made something helpful. She asked to meet behind the rec center. When I got there, she handed me a folder. Inside was a schedule. She wanted specific times when I could go outside by myself, approved and signed. She said she spent hours designing it. I flipped through pages of time slots, rules, and weird notes like avoid large crowds to reduce risk. She looked proud. I felt like someone just assigned me homework I never asked for. I told her she didn't need to restrict when I could walk outside. She said that was her job. She said if she let me wander freely, I might get influenced by strangers or fall into bad habits. She said partners protect each other from chaos. Her voice was calm the whole time, which made it creepier. She said couples should watch over each other like caretakers of ancient treasure. I joked and said I wasn't treasure. She said treasure never thinks it is treasure. She didn't crack a smile. I tried ignoring the schedule. I hung out with friends after school like usual, but she caught me. She texted asking where I was, and when I told her, she said I was breaking the agreement. I reminded her I never agreed. She typed back that refusal was reckless. She said she worried I would get hurt or influenced by people who don't understand us. She said spending time outdoors without her supervision was risky. The next time we met, she carried another binder. This one had laminated pages of emergency scenarios and steps I should take. She said if I followed them, I would be safer. She talked about natural disasters, choking hazards, slippery sidewalks, car horns startling pedestrians, dogs running loose, and I started sweating just listening. She said she spent hours every night thinking of ways to keep me safe. She sounded proud and exhausted at the same time. She wanted me to update her every time I walked out of my house. She wanted timestamps and routes. She sent me maps with highlighted paths, telling me where to avoid cracks and sidewalks. She even circled a part of town where a guy slipped once 3 years ago and broke his wrist. Her brain worked like a surveillance camera no one asked for. One Saturday, I was chilling on my porch, just scrolling and eating chips when she walked up silently. She asked why I didn't tell her I went outside. I told her it was my front porch. She said accidents happen 6 feet from home. She said couples prevent trouble by staying aware. She asked me to sign a revised schedule. She had added color-coded zones depending on danger levels. I looked at her binder and felt like a character in a spy movie, except I was not the spy. I was the target. My friends noticed I started leaving less and checking my phone constantly. They asked if my parents grounded me. I just said things were complicated. I didn't want to explain that someone thought sidewalks were death traps waiting for me personally. I felt embarrassed that I let it get this far. One afternoon after school, we sat on the bleachers behind the field. She pulled out a clipboard. She asked me if I wanted to live a long, safe life. She said she couldn't be with someone who didn't follow protective rules. She said safety must be monitored or chaos wins. She taught that she was giving a speech to a courtroom. The wind kept blowing her papers everywhere, which kind of ruined her dramatic moment. But she chased them like they were priceless. Then she said something that really stuck. She said accidents are not random. She said they come from disobedience. That word hit weird. I stared at her feeling this sinking feeling. She didn't want to date me. She wanted to manage me. I decided to test her. I went outside that evening to grab snacks at the corner store. I didn't text her. 5 minutes into my walk, my phone buzzed like a bee on caffeine. She said she was coming to find me. She said I was being reckless and disloyal. She showed up out of breath, clutching her binder. She grabbed my wrist and steered me home like I was a lost kid. She lectured the whole walk about how I could be influenced or harmed. I nodded quietly because arguing didn't help. My parents noticed her dragging me home and asked questions. I dodged them. But that night, I sat on my bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how weirdly small my world had become. Every moment outside felt like breaking a rule. I started avoiding sunlight like a vampire, staying indoors with boring snacks just to avoid her lectures. The moment everything snapped was during lunch at school. I was talking with a friend at a table when Marme slid in between us and handed me a new schedule printed in smaller font to fit more rules. She said I needed permission to walk between classes with certain people because they distracted my focus. My friend looked at her like she just teleported from a different planet. I felt a hot embarrassment crawl up my neck. After she left, my friend said I needed to run. I spent the next 2 days thinking. I sat alone in my room, binder pages spread like a crime scene. I read through rules about stairs, sitting positions, sneaker traction, how to breathe when walking near crowds, and even how long I should rest between outdoor trips. It was like she thought the entire world was a giant booby trap. Finally, I asked her to meet me near the small lake by school. Ducks floated around like they had no problems. We sat on a bench. She held her clipboard tightly, ready to add rules. Before she could speak, I told her I couldn't do this. I said I needed freedom to walk, breathe, and exist without supervision. Her eyebrows shot up like I slapped her binder. She said without oversight, danger spreads. She said couples protect each other by restricting risk. I shook my head. She looked at me with this stunned, wounded expression, like I betrayed a holy mission. She closed her binder slowly and said she couldn't be with someone who rejects safety. Then she walked away quietly, papers tucked under her arm like soldiers retreating. The week after felt strange. I went outside whenever I wanted. The sunshine felt bigger. I walked to the bakery, grabbed a snack, sat on the curb eating messy crumbs without fear of choking hazards. I left my phone at home a couple times and didn't care. I felt air I forgot existed. I still see Marmee at school. Sometimes she trains new couples on safe dating habits. She walks around with fresh binders like brochures. People take them politely and toss them into lockers. She doesn't notice. These days, I walk alone sometimes, not because I'm scared, but because it is peaceful. I laugh with friends again. If I trip, I just get up. The world still feels chaotic, but in a normal way. It's kind of funny how regular everything felt the day I met ads. I wasn't expecting anything. I was just standing in front of the hallway mirror at school, fixing my hoodie because the zipper gets stuck all the time, when someone behind me dropped a textbook that sounded like thunder. I turned around and there he was, scrambling to pick it up. He smiled way too wide like he was pitching a commercial. He asked if I was going to the new taco place after school because a bunch of people were talking about it. I said maybe, and he said he'd meet me there anyway. Something about him moved fast, like he didn't have time to waste. After school, we met outside that taco place with a neon cactus sign buzzing in the window. We sat at a table near the corner where the light flickered enough to make everything look pale. We talked about school, food, random funny stuff teachers say. Nothing weird. He was easy to talk to. When he paid, his phone buzzed nonstop, and he said it was just his parents checking in. I didn't think twice. Lots of parents text too much. A few days later, we started hanging out more. One afternoon, we sat on a bench near the community garden behind the library. He pulled out his phone mid-conversation and started typing. I waited, thinking he was responding to a friend. Then he told me he had to update his parents about what we were talking about. I raised an eyebrow, but he shrugged and said they liked staying involved. He said couples who hide stuff at the beginning get doomed later. I laughed and asked if doom was really the word he wanted. He nodded with full seriousness. I brushed it off as just quirky. The first red flag showed up at dinner. We went to a diner with green boots and crinkly paper menus. Every time I said something about my day, his phone buzzed instantly. He looked down, typed something, then nodded like he was listening to orders from Command Central. After the fifth buzz, I asked if everything was okay. He said his parents were curious about me. Not curious like friendly, curious like researching a science specimen. They asked what I ate, how I dressed, what I planned to do after school. I joked maybe they wanted to hire me. He didn't laugh. Then things escalated. One morning, I woke up to a message from ads saying his parents wanted to meet me digitally before approving more dates. They asked for a video call. I stared at my screen confused. They wanted to know my study habits, if I had siblings, if I understood respect, and if I was structurally reliable. Whatever that meant. When I hesitated, Ad said his parents needed that to feel comfortable. He said relationships are group decisions. I blinked at that line. After the call, which felt like a job interview for a job I didn't apply for, Ads told me his parents said I seemed manageable. I should have run right then, but instead I nodded, trying to be polite. I told myself they were just involved. Lots of parents hover, but then things got worse. The next time we hung out, his parents texted throughout the entire conversation. Ping, ping, ping. They asked why I paused before answering certain questions. They asked why I wore sneakers instead of nicer shoes. They asked why I ordered soda instead of water. Whenever I answered differently than they liked, my phone buzzed from ads telling me they were concerned. I started feeling like there was a live audience judging my every move. At lunch one day, I mentioned maybe switching electives. 3 minutes later, his parents texted him saying they discouraged instability in schedules. They barely knew me. I asked why they cared. He said my decisions were now part of their decisions. He said families merge slowly like puzzle pieces. The metaphor made my stomach twist. My friends noticed the buzzing. They joked someone installed a tracking device in my pocket. I laughed awkwardly, pretending it was nothing. They didn't know that if I ignored messages too long, Abs would look nervous, then show me paragraphs from his mom explaining why silence signals disrespect. The logic didn't make sense, but he believed every word. One Saturday, we went to a little cafe with floorboards that creaked. We sat by a window where the sun made everything too bright. Ads asked what sports I liked. I said I wasn't really into sports. He froze, tapping his phone fast. Seconds later, he said his dad thought I should try soccer because it would build structure. I shrugged, laughing it off. But Ads wanted me to sign up. He said it would make his parents happy. When I said no, he looked genuinely confused, like I refused a sacred ritual. After that, every small decision had to be approved. If I wanted to buy new headphones, his parents asked why I needed them. If I wanted to hang out with friends, they wanted full names and activities. If I didn't respond, Ads got stressed, pacing like he was failing a test. One evening, I was at home watching videos on my laptop when my phone buzzed again. It was a list of questions from his dad asking about my goals in life, how often I got angry, and what chores I did. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, Ads called panicking. He said ignoring them made me seem unpredictable. He asked me to answer everything right then. I told him I was busy. He said predictability keeps relationships safe. That word safe was starting to sound ugly. The breaking point came during dinner with my parents. We were eating spaghetti, talking about nothing important, when my phone buzzed 4 times in a row. It was Ads. He said his parents wanted pictures of my meal to make sure I ate balanced food. I stared at the screen, jaw hanging open. My parents asked what was wrong. I mumbled nothing and kept eating. After dinner, I texted Ads asking why his parents needed pictures. He typed about how couples must align diets for long-term compatibility. That was it. That was the moment something snapped in my brain like wheat chalk. A few days later, we met behind the library. He came holding his phone like a lifeline. He said his parents drafted guidelines for our relationship. It was 3 pages long. It wanted my schedule, my chores, my sleep times, what classes I took. They wanted approval before I spent over $15 on anything. They said financial discipline starts young. My chest tightened. I looked at him. I asked if he would ever make decisions without them. He hesitated. Then he said good partners trust parents more than feelings, like they're the referees of love. I told him I couldn't live like this. I said I wasn't dating his parents. He blinked fast, like I broke a rule no one talks about. When I said I wanted out, he said he had to text them immediately. He typed a long message. His parents texted back right away. He read their response, then told me they had rejected my exit because I hadn't given proper justification. I stared at him stunned. He thought they controlled breakups too. That was the moment I walked away. He called after me, asking for justification forms. I kept walking. The next week at school, he didn't talk to me, but sometimes he stared like I was unfinished paperwork. People whispered that he was dating someone else already. I saw him in the hallway later showing a new partner's answers to his parents through text, nodding like he was proving something. I went back to hanging with my friends, eating messy lunches, buying headphones without asking anyone. Every purchase felt rebellious and weirdly amazing. My phone stopped buzzing. The silence felt like fresh air. These days, I still see Ads, sometimes always typing, always asking permission. He follows rules that are invisible to everyone else. I realized something. I don't need a whole committee to approve how I live my life. I met Narla in one of those weird gaps between classes when nobody knows where to stand. I was leaning on a locker, trying to decide if I was hungry or just bored, when she walked up talking about the posters on the wall. She said the student council picked ugly colors and they should have let someone with taste design them. I laughed because she said it like she had just uncovered a conspiracy. She talked fast, hopping from one topic to another, and somehow it never felt forced. With a bell rang, she handed me her phone and told me to type my number in. Just like that, she drifted off down the hallway. Our first date was simple. We got hot chocolate at this tiny shop tucked behind a thrift store, the kind of place where all the chairs wobble and the lights hum. We sat near the window, watching cars splash through puddles. She asked what kind of people I liked hanging out with and what my hobbies were. She nodded a lot, like she was collecting data. Her questions felt pointed, but I thought she was just curious. After that night, she texted nonstop. She'd send paragraphs about random thoughts, funny videos, and weird dreams. I liked the attention at first. About a week later, she started asking what I thought about loyalty. Not in a casual way. She wanted rules, definitions, lines. She asked how often I text friends, how many girlfriends I talked to, and whether I would delete numbers if she felt uneasy. I joked that she sounded like some kind of detective. She didn't laugh. She typed back that loyalty is proven, not assumed. I stared at that message longer than I should have. One Wednesday, she was waiting by the gate after school. She said we should walk to the park near the basketball courts. We sat on a bench watching some kids argue about who fouled who first. She brought up trust again, but this time she spoke like she had practiced. She said most people lie. She said relationships need testing or they crumble. She didn't say how she tested, though. She just smiled, tapping her fingers on the bench like a drum. The next few days were normal, or I thought they were. Then something strange happened. A random account messaged me online. The profile picture was just a blurry sunset. The person asked if I was dating anyone and said they saw me in the hallway sometimes. It felt off. I cut the conversation short. I told him I was with someone and ended it. A few hours later, Narla texted saying she was proud of how I answered temptation. She sent a screenshot of the conversation. The account was her. My stomach dropped. She said she had to be sure I wasn't easily swayed. I told her it was weird. She said real life is weird. Over the next week, more random accounts messaged me. Some pretended to be new students. Some pretended to be old friends. Some tried to compliment me. Some asked if Narla treated me right. I ignored most, answered politely to a few, and blocked a couple. Every time, Narla magically knew. She said I passed certain sections and failed others. She pointed out tiny word choices as proof of doubt. It felt like school quizzes, but for my identity. One afternoon, we hung out behind the school gym. The air smelled like old rubber and the wall paint was chipped. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through an actual spreadsheet. There were columns labeled with my reactions, timestamps, emojis used, and tone guesses. She said she analyzed patterns. She said consistency equals loyalty. I blinked at her like she had spoken a language nobody taught me. She asked why I paused 3 minutes before replying to one of the fake accounts. I said I was doing homework. She wrote that down like evidence. It got worse online. She made fake drama scenarios, pretending to be someone upset with her and asking what I thought. She watched how defensive I got. She set up situations where someone pretended to flirt with me in public. Later, she graded my body language from across the hallway. She didn't scream or threaten. She just held this quiet pressure like gravity. One evening at home, I laid on my bed scrolling through notifications. I had 3 new messages from unknown accounts. One said they liked my haircut. Another said they wanted to hang out sometime. The last one just sent a waving emoji. Paranoid now, I asked Narla if these were her. She replied instantly. Not all. She said some were hers, some were spontaneous. She refused to tell me which were real. She said life does not label tests. I started pulling back from the internet. I stopped posting. I stopped liking photos. Every move felt like a trap. My friends noticed I was online less, and they sent confused messages. I didn't respond much. I told them I was busy. Inside, I felt like someone watched everything I typed. Then came the confession that shattered everything. We were sitting on the grass by the soccer field. She twirled a blade of grass between her fingers. She said she created multiple fake accounts, not just a few. She said she had been testing me since day one. She said I failed 27% of the scenarios. I didn't even know what that meant. She listed examples. Times when I said maybe instead of no. Times when I took too long to reply. Times when I called a friend funny. She said loyalty is not vague. She said loyalty needs to survive imagination. My chest felt heavy. I asked why she needed fake crises. She said real people hide motives. She said imaginary tests showed true patterns. She admitted she failed me in imaginary situations too. She said in her head she pictured me leaving. She cried because of fictional me. I stared at her speechless. She apologized to imaginary versions of us daily. It did not feel romantic. It felt like being swallowed by fog. The next few days she doubled down. She said we could fix my score. She sent me practice conversations. She wanted me to rehearse answers. She asked me to delete every girl in my contacts. She asked for screenshots of my call history. She asked how often I daydreamed about others. She asked if a hypothetical friend complimenting me would change my attention. I didn't know how to answer anymore. Every word felt like stepping on cracked ice. My sleep got weird. I would stare at the ceiling imagining her checking logs, building charts, making new profiles. I felt guilty doing nothing wrong. I started thinking like her. What if everyone online had a motive? What if jokes were traps? My brain got loud. The turning point happened during lunch. She slammed her binder on the table. She said she caught me failing a scenario. Turns out, someone message requested me the night before. I never saw it. She thought ignoring temptation was suspicious. She said silence can mean hesitation. She demanded I explain why I did not defend our relationship to an unseen message I had never opened. People at the table stared at us. My face burned. She pointed at screenshots and graphs. I felt like a suspect, not a boyfriend. That afternoon, I walked home instead of hanging out. The breeze felt sharp in a good way. I ignored my buzzing phone. Once home, I tossed myself onto the couch and just stared at the wall. I thought about all the fictional disasters she invented, all the imaginary breakups she mourned, all the tests I never agreed to. My real life shrunk beneath made-up issues. The next day, I asked to meet near the bike racks. She walked up clutching more printed pages. Before she spoke, I said I was done. I said real trust cannot grow in fake soil. She froze. She said she could simulate improvements. I shook my head. She said I needed training. I walked away. She asked about my justifications. I kept walking. For days, she texted screenshots of blank message threads saying absence proved betrayal. I blocked her. She made more accounts. I blocked those too. Eventually, the buzzing stopped. The way I met Pete was kinda lame, honestly. There wasn't anything magical or dramatic. I was sitting on the curb outside the school entrance waiting for my friend because he forgot his backpack in the science room again. Cars rolled by slow, like they were half asleep. Pete walked up wearing a jacket that looked too fancy for a normal school day. He asked if the buses already left, even though he clearly wasn't trying to catch one. He hovered there like he wanted a conversation, so we talked. He said he liked how calm I seemed. He smiled a lot, and not creepy, just regular. Eventually, he asked for my number. Simple. Our first hangout wasn't really a date. We met this new smoothie stand that everyone kept hyping for no reason. The drinks tasted like liquid jello, but we laughed about it. He asked a bunch of questions about my hobbies, my old schools, and my favorite foods. Basic stuff. He seemed curious, and I didn't think twice. We walked around downtown and looked at thrift shop windows. He pointed at random shirts and rated them like a judge on some fashion show. It was funny enough. Then came the second date. We grabbed burgers and sat at a table made of some weird shiny material that felt sticky no matter how clean it looked. While we ate, he casually asked about people I dated before. Not angry or jealous, just curious. I kept it vague because who wants to unload romantic history between bites of fries? He nodded thoughtfully, then asked follow-up questions that felt oddly structured, like he wrote them down earlier. Later that night, I got a long text from him saying he respected honesty and loved clarity. Whatever. I didn't think too hard. 2 days later, something weird happened. I woke up to a message request from someone whose name I didn't recognize. The message said they were doing a relationship survey about me. The questions were personal. Stuff like how I treated people, whether I got angry easily, how I handled breakups. I stared at the screen confused. I figured it was spam and ignored it. But then another message came later that evening from a different person asking the same type of stuff. My stomach had that sinking feeling like when teachers pass out tests you didn't study for. I asked Pete if he knew anything. He instantly admitted he emailed some of my exes and old crushes asking them to rate me. He thought it would be helpful to understand my patterns. He wrote patterns like we were in science class. I asked why he needed strangers' opinions. He rolled his eyes and said relationships require research. I brushed it off as weird curiosity, hoping it would stop. It didn't. After that, he started casually asking for contact info of anyone I ever talked to romantically. Even people I barely dated. He said he wanted a full picture. He talked about reference checks like he was hiring an employee. I told him it made me uncomfortable. He tilted his head and said discomfort is temporary while truth is forever. His voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. The next week, I found out he had emailed at least 5 people. He asked them if I was trustworthy, if I ghosted people, if I forgot birthdays, if I ever ignored texts, if I lied about homework, if I ate too late at night, weirdly specific stuff. Some of my old exes screenshot the emails and sent them to me with messages like, "Dude, what is this?" One guy I barely dated wrote back to Pete just for fun, reading my communication skills like he was reviewing a product online. Pete forwarded that review to me like a proud teacher. I sat there on my bed staring at the screen, feeling like I got graded on behavior I didn't know counted. When we met again, we sat on a bench near the skate park where half the kids pretended they could land tricks. Pete pulled out papers. Actual printed papers. He had a questionnaire with highlighted sections. He rattled off concerns from people's responses. I didn't know whether to laugh or run. He said one of my exes mentioned I forget plans sometimes, so he asked me to sign a consistency agreement. I pushed the papers back. He said refusing was suspicious. Things spiraled. He started texting me after every conversation asking if I meant everything I said word for word. He said accuracy keeps relationships strong. He asked me to rate my tone after our calls. Who does that? Once, when I walked into school, he handed me an envelope. Inside were printed opinions from people I hadn't talked to in months. Some were jokes, but he treated them like they were eternal truths carved in stone. People at school started whispering. One girl asked if I was part of some dating research project. I didn't know how to explain that Pete basically crowdsourced my personality. One night, while I was chilling on the couch watching videos, my phone buzzed. An ex I barely still talked to sent me a screenshot. Pete emailed them again. He asked if they noticed any subtle breathing patterns when I was nervous. Breathing patterns? I felt my face heat up. I texted Pete angrily. He said breathing reveals sincerity. I said he needed to chill. He sent back a paragraph about data integrity. I started feeling paranoid. Every flaw became another point on his invisible chart. If I forgot to text good morning, he'd bring up an X saying I forget important things. If I got tired and quiet, he'd say someone once reported I shut down emotionally. He built a library of other people's complaints and used them like a manual against me. One day we walked downtown near the crosswalk where pigeons always hang out. He asked why I sounded annoyed on a call 2 days ago. I said I was tired. He said tiredness doesn't change tone. Attitude does. Then he pulled out printed feedback from someone who dated me in middle school. Middle school. They wrote I disappeared for a whole week once. I laughed because I actually had chicken pox. He didn't care. He circled it like undeniable evidence of flakeness. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dating a person. I was dating a resume auditor. The final straw snapped during lunch. I was sitting with my friends laughing about some dumb video when Pete marched over. He dropped papers on the table. My friend stared. Pete pointed at a highlighted line saying I had once forgotten to bring someone snacks on a date. Everyone at the table blinked. He loudly asked what I planned to do to fix that behavior. I froze. The entire cafeteria went quiet like in movies, except there wasn't dramatic music, just the buzzing lights. I stood up, grabbed the papers, crumpled them, and told him I wasn't being reviewed anymore. I walked off fast. Behind me, he yelled that I was avoiding constructive criticism. I didn't reply. That afternoon, he texted 4 times. Long paragraphs about improvement. Growth. Assessment models. I blocked him. Then I blocked 3 random accounts that popped up pretending to be strangers needing opinions about someone. Nice try. After that, life felt quieter. No ratings. No reports. No data sheets on my breathing. I told my friends everything, and they laughed in disbelief. One of them said if dating becomes paperwork, run. I said I already sprinted. Weeks passed. Sometimes I saw Pete in the hallway carrying a binder thicker than before, talking to someone new. Their smile looked nervous. I hoped they were smarter than me. I spent more lunches just goofing around, eating fries without someone pointing out an ex claimed I'd chew weird. I felt a real person again, not a scanned file. Looking back, the whole situation feels like someone tried to treat dating like a group project where everyone grades you. But I'm not a questionnaire. I'm not crowdsourced feedback. I get to define myself. The first time we talked, it was outside the school auditorium where everyone was crowded around waiting to get in for some assembly about fire safety. I was leaning against the wall watching people push and complain when Lids came up next to me and pointed at a guy wearing shoes that were 3 sizes too bright. She said outfits are secret codes. I shrugged, pretending to know what that meant. She kept talking about clothing choices the way some people talk about famous paintings. Her eyes scanned everyone like a fashion scanner that never ran out of battery. Our first date happened the following Saturday. She invited me to this old plaza where pigeons fight over crumbs like they're in a boxing ring. We sat near a fountain shaped like a dolphin that looked more like a blob. Liz showed up wearing a pink jacket and jeans that matched the shade of her shoelaces. She said it was intentional harmony. I wore a hoodie and sneakers. Nothing matching. She smiled politely, but I felt like she silently scored me on a chart. We walked around checking out small shops. She stopped at windows and whispered critiques like she hosted a fashion show in her head. Too busy, too loud, too messy, she'd mutter. I nodded when it seemed safe. At the end of the day, she said we would look great together aesthetically if I adjusted my style. I chuckled and thought she was kind of joking. Spoiler, she was not joking. The second date, we met near the movie theater where the posters fade in the sun. Liz showed up wearing a black hoodie with white stripes. She pointed at my hoodie and said it clashed with hers. She held a bag. Inside were several shirts in colors that matched her palette. She told me to pick one. I hesitated, but she insisted. She said couples who coordinate send a message. I didn't ask who the message was for. I changed in the restroom because arguing in front of strangers wasn't worth it. After the movie, she asked how I felt wearing something that matched her. I said it was fine. She said fine was not a strong enough word. She said unity should feel electric. I scratched my head and said the shirt felt soft. She sighed like I missed the point. Then came her big idea. On a Wednesday night, she texted a rough sketch she drew on her tablet. 2 cartoon figures wearing identical outfits. She said we should match every day we see each other. She said people should know we belong together at a glance. I stared at the message, confused. I asked what if I felt like wearing something random. She replied that self-direction leads to chaos. She used the word chaos to describe a blue hoodie. That was wild. The next time we met, she brought a duffel bag. Inside were outfits, whole outfits, shirts, pants, even socks. All matching. She handed me a striped shirt and jeans. She said the stripes had the same thickness as hers. She said thickness represents relationship alignment. I asked if she was serious about stripes representing alignment. She gave me a lecture about visual symbolism and how couple aesthetics tell stories subconsciously. School got weird fast. We started hanging out in the mornings before classes. She would open her bag and pull out clothes, checking if colors faded or if patterns clashed with the day's theme. One day was pastel day. Another was navy day. She had a calendar. If I showed up wearing anything else, she crossed her arms hard enough to fold metal. She would gently guide me to the restroom and hand me a new outfit. I felt like a clothing mannequin. My friends stared. They whispered. One of them asked if I joined a fashion cult. I said it was complicated. I didn't want to explain that my girlfriend said mismatched outfits show instability and emotional support. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but she said it all so calmly, like math facts. One Saturday, we walked downtown near the shop that sells overpriced candles for $14 each. Liz held the binder she recently started. Inside were color theory pages, diagrams of complementary outfits, and mood-based clothing plans. She flipped pages, pointing at charts. She said when I wore green, her nerves felt jittery, so I should stick to blues. She said colors control energy waves. To test it, she made me swat 3 shirts on a bench like some rushed costume change. People walked by confused. I felt like I was auditioning for a clothing ad. She started buying clothes for me. At first, small stuff like socks. Then more. She spent $40 on a jacket that matched her scarf. She texted me pictures of outfits at midnight, asking which one I would wear next time. If I took more than a few minutes to answer, she texted question marks. Lots of them. One day, in the hallway at school, she yanked a hat off my head because it clashed with her shoes. She said randomness ruins connection. She put a beanie on me instead. Same color as her backpack. Students stared. I pretended I didn't see them. My closet at home became a storage unit for her choices. She even disapproved of shirts I owned long before we met. She said sentimental clothing sends the wrong signals. I had to hide my favorite hoodie under my bed like stolen treasure. The breaking point started with socks. We were sitting behind the bleachers. She noticed my socks had uneven stripes. Hers had even stripes. She looked upset. Not yelling upset, but disappointed upset. She pulled out spare socks from her bag. Then she asked me to rotate to face the sun at a certain angle so the colors would contrast correctly in public. I wanted to run. She said couples who misalign visually appear fragmented socially. She said fragmented couples break apart faster. She said this like she was narrating a documentary. Weeks passed. Matching outfits became required. She wanted us to dress alike in hallways at lunch after school. She tracked what people said about our clothes. She screenshotted compliments. She highlighted criticism. She started keeping a file. I remember the day it blew up. We walked into school wearing matching yellow sweaters. Bright yellow, like lemon candy. A kid behind us joked we looked like bananas in love. Lids smiled proudly. I laughed quietly. Then he joked again later, saying we looked like traffic signs. I laughed harder. Lid's smile disappeared. During lunch, she confronted me. She said laughing encouraged mockery. She said if I cared, I'd defend our aesthetic. She said fashion loyalty is relationship loyalty. I stared at her banana sweater and wondered if reality broke. That afternoon, I wore a black hoodie to walk home. Just a plain hoodie. I needed it. I needed to breathe without stripes. When I got home, Lids called. She sounded betrayed. She asked why I dared break visual unity. She said people might think we drifted. She cried, not loud crying, but silent tears that made me feel like a villain from a movie. She said outfits are promises. I didn't know clothes could carry that much weight. Days after, she brought new outfits daily. She texted me pictures of matching pajama sets. Pajamas. She said nighttime visuals matter too. She asked if I could wear matching outfits on family holidays. She asked if we could buy identical winter coats. She asked if color fades meant symbolic heartbreak. My head spun. My friends begged me to stop. One told me I was turning into a clothing doll. Another said my closet looked like a costume department. I felt trapped between fabric and feelings. The final straw arrived on a windy Tuesday. Linz brought a denim jacket that mirrored hers perfectly. She asked me to wear it forever as our signature. I said forever was huge. She said commitment is measured in denim. A gust of wind blew the jacket into a puddle. I picked it up, soaked. Liz stared at the mud stain like someone stabbed her. She said the universe was sending a warning. She pulled out a replacement jacket from her bag. She had 2 backups. I swear she saw the future. I finally asked her why outfits mattered so much. She said because without matching visuals, the world might not know we're connected. She said strangers need proof. I said our connection doesn't need an audience. She froze, like her brain glitched. Then she whispered that I didn't understand love. The next morning, she waited at my locker holding a new outfit. I told her I couldn't keep matching. I needed freedom. She blinked rapidly like she was buffering. Her voice got small. She said mismatching is a breakup level offense. She said love without clothing unity is hollow. I shook my head. She hugged the outfit like it was alive. Then she walked away robotic, leaving a pair of striped socks behind. After that, I wore whatever. Messy colors. Mismatched shoes sometimes. My friends cheered. My closet sighed with relief. I see Lids sometimes walking with someone new. They wear identical hats. Identical jackets. Their socks. Perfect symmetry. The new person smiles nervously. Lids inspects their sleeves. I hope they like stripes. It started kind of exciting, like that rush you get when summer hits and you think everything is about to get better. That was my mood the day I first hung out with Ray. He seemed confident in a way that almost pulled people in, and I guess I wanted some of that energy. The first few weeks were harmless. We met up around the city, grabbed food, hung out at parks, wandered malls just to waste time. I felt like I had found someone who actually cared about where I was and what I was doing. I did not realize how intense that would become. I never expected that caring would turn into checking, then checking would turn into tracking. It became clear when he asked me to share my location. I accepted because it seemed normal at the time. Some of my friends did it with their partners, so it felt like I should not make a big deal about it. I remember the first time he commented on me taking a different route home. I had cut through this old neighborhood because the traffic on the main road was horrible. He sent a long message about how suspicious it seemed. I did not respond at first, thinking he was joking. But when I finally called him later, he sounded serious in the messages he sent. He wanted to know exactly what made me turn left instead of right. That moment made something in my stomach twist, but I pushed it down. Over the next month, it got worse. Every time I left my house, my phone buzzed. He would tell me I was off the street I normally used. He would question why I stopped near a store I never talked about. Sometimes I would just sit in my car and scroll through nothing on my phone, trying to get my head together before heading home. But even that set him off. He assumed I was meeting someone. I never did. I started worrying about battery percentage like my life depended on it because if my phone died, he panicked. Then he panicked at me. It was like living inside a tiny invisible cage that followed my car. The weird thing is how fast I started changing my routine. I found myself checking my own location on my map, making sure my little blue dot stayed on paths he already knew. My world shrank to familiar streets, predictable turns, and gas stations he approved of. My friends started noticing I skipped hangouts. They asked if everything was fine. I kept saying I was great, but I knew something felt off. When you spend too long pretending everything is normal, sometimes you start believing it is. It was easier than admitting I was freaked out about someone knowing every single move I made. One night, I took a different exit on the freeway because of construction. He blew up my messages. My phone buzzed nonstop while I sat there gripping the steering wheel. I got home and just laid in bed staring at the ceiling. I felt tired in a way sleep could not fix. I realized that I did not even enjoy leaving my house anymore. There was always this heavy pressure like someone breathing on my shoulder. It also leaked into school and work. I kept checking my phone, terrified it would light up with a new complaint. Even people around me noticed I looked drained. I started imagining how different things felt before all this tracking stuff. I missed wandering aimlessly. I missed taking a long route just because I wanted to look at random houses. Back then, if I got lost, it was just funny, with Ray. Getting lost turned into an interrogation. I even stopped going to my favorite fast food place because it was on a street he never liked. My world used to feel open. With him, every road felt like it had spikes at the end of it. The moment everything cracked was when my phone glitched and updated my location wrong for about 10 minutes. It looked like I had pulled into some random apartment complex. Ray lost it in messages. He demanded I explain why I was there. I sat in a parking lot feeling nothing but exhaustion. I told myself if I gave in again, I would never get out of this. My chest felt tight, and I realized I was not allowed to just exist on my own anymore. That thought hit harder than anything. I turned my phone off and just let the silence sit there. It felt like ripping off some bandage that had been stuck for way too long. The next day, I ended things. Not in person. Not with a long message. I just said I was done. I blocked his location access and everything else. It did not feel brave or dramatic. It just felt like letting go of a weight I had been dragging for months. For a few weeks after, I caught myself checking my route like he was still watching. That was the part that bothered me the most. Even after he was gone, his rules stayed stuck in my brain like gum on concrete. Slowly, it faded little pieces at a time. Now when I drive, I take random turns again. I stop at gas stations for no reason. I let myself wander. I do not care if the route makes sense or if my phone battery dips too low. There is nothing chasing me anymore. Sometimes I remember how small my world got, and it freaks me out. But mostly I feel grateful to live in something bigger again. I know people talk about control in relationships like it is obvious, but most of the time it sneaks in disguise as care. It creeps slowly until you forget what freedom felt like. Anyway, that was Ray. Not exciting, not dramatic, just tiring. Leaving felt like the first real breath I took in months. No lesson, no speech, just done. I got my space back. I got my quiet back. That is enough for me. I woke up one morning and realized time had started to feel like homework. That thought hit me later, after everything with Tina already happened, but it fits. Back when I first met her, I did not think anything could feel that way. She looked organized. She carried notebooks everywhere. Most people use their phones for planning, but she liked paper. I thought that was interesting. We started hanging out at this quiet coffee spot behind a grocery store. The chairs scraped on tile, and the place smelled like old beans. It felt harmless. Maybe that is how most trouble starts. Small, nothing loud, just quiet and steady. We talked about school and goals and who annoyed us. She asked real questions. I liked that part. It made me feel like she paid attention. After 2 weeks of talking, she asked if we should date. I said yes because everything seemed easy. That lasted a short time. A week after we started dating, she pulled out a folder. She told me she wanted both of us to keep track of our emotional performance. She used those words. Emotional performance. I thought she was joking. She was not. She handed me a sheet with categories. Mood stability, availability, patience, support. She wanted a weekly written report that explained how I did in each category. I wrote one because I thought it would be funny. I turned it in like I was submitting a class assignment. When she gave it back, she had marked it with red ink. She circled words and wrote comments like vague or needs detail. She graded it. She gave me a B. It felt weird, but also kind of impossible to argue with. I told myself she just liked structure. I did not want to cause problems, so I wrote the next report. It got longer. She wanted examples. She asked why I got quiet during a movie and said I should reflect on that in writing. Soon I had a notebook dedicated just for these reports. Monday nights I sat at my desk and wrote paragraphs about how I handled stress or if I showed enough appreciation. She graded them the next day. I tried to fix whatever she marked as weak. It made me feel like a robot. She stopped asking how I felt in person. She just waited for the next report. It turned every argument into paperwork. If we had disagreement, she told me to document it later. I started making notes to prepare for my report like I was studying for a test. My friends noticed I left early on Mondays. They thought I had tutoring. I laughed and told them nothing unusual happened. I told myself I was holding things together, but there was this slow tension in my chest. Every grade felt like a measurement of my worth. When she gave me an A, I felt relief instead of pride. When she gave me a C, I felt like the floor dropped out. I changed how I acted so my next report would look good. I stopped talking about negative things. I stopped showing when I was tired. I smiled even when I did not want to. We met at parks sometimes. I sat on cold benches while she flipped through my pages. She tapped her pen against the paper and frowned. She said I needed to increase emotional openness. It sounded like something printed in a manual. I told myself it was fine. She wanted us to improve, but it never stopped. I kept writing. She kept grading. It was like chasing a finish line that moved farther away the closer I got. One day she asked for more categories: time management, internal honesty, romantic consistency. That last one confused me. She said I needed to prove consistent affection across the week. I felt like someone had set a checklist inside my mind. If I did not text her enough times, she marked it down. If I did not compliment her during a date, that showed up in red later. She highlighted problem areas. She handed me improvement goals. I accepted them because arguing made my stomach twist. After 2 months, I noticed I did not talk casually anymore. Every feeling turned into report material. If something bothered me, I tried to describe it clearly in writing instead of saying anything out loud. She treated daily life like data. She said patterns mattered. She built graphs for my reports once. She held a page up and explained where I plateaued. I stared and wondered when dating turned into evaluation. Sleep got harder. I lay in bed thinking about wording. Was I too vague? Did I show enough growth? My brain repeated her categories. I woke up tired every day. At school, I stared at my notebook and took secret notes when I felt upset so I would not forget to include them. It drained me. My friends joked about me carrying that notebook everywhere. They called it my diary. I laughed and said it was nothing. It was not nothing. One Monday, I sat at my desk and stared at a blank page. I could not write another breakdown of my feelings. My head felt foggy. I shut the notebook and sat in silence. My phone buzzed. It was Tina asking if my report was ready. I said not yet, and she sent a long message about consistency. The next morning, she handed me last week's report. My grade dropped again. She circled entire paragraphs and wrote confusing structure. She said we needed to correct my approach. That was the moment something cracked. I walked home and thought about how I never felt like myself around her anymore. I felt like a student trying to please a strict teacher. But teachers actually wanted you to grow. She wanted control. Every graded line tightened around my thoughts. My chest hurt. I could not tell if I actually felt anything or if I was performing. That scared me more than anything. When your feelings stop feeling yours, something's wrong. I did not write another report. I sat in bed that night and looked at the stack of pages on my desk. They looked heavy even though paper is light. I opened my messages and told her I was done with the reports. She replied with paragraphs. She explained that we would fall apart without structure. She said relationships need accountability. She said I was irresponsible. I stared at the screen and felt empty. I told her I needed space. The next morning, she showed up outside my house. She held a pen and wanted to talk about my lack of submission. She used that word. Submission. My stomach twisted. I told her I was ending things. She looked confused. She asked for one final report explaining my decision. I closed the door. My hands shook. It took a week for my brain to stop replaying her categories. I kept expecting someone to grade me. After that, I tried to live normal again. I hung out with friends and ignored the urge to document everything. Slowly, I forgot the categories. I threw the notebook away. It felt like dropping a backpack full of rocks. My world felt less heavy. I started speaking without thinking about how it would look on paper. I learned to feel without writing footnotes. There was no big lesson. It just happened. It ended. It stopped controlling me. I got my thoughts back. I wake up now and my feelings belong to me. That is enough. I met Cindy in the most boring way possible. I was standing in line at this sleepy pizza place after school, waiting forever, and she was behind me complaining about how slow everything was. I turned around and we just started talking. Nothing meaningful. Just random opinions about toppings and how the tables always felt sticky. I thought she was funny. She rolled her eyes a lot and shrugged like nothing impressed her, but for some reason I liked that. We exchanged numbers, and soon we were texting every night about stupid shows and stuff we wanted to do during break. It felt regular. Simple. I liked simple. The start of our relationship was fine. We walked around the local mall, sat on benches, and shared cheap food that tasted better than it should. She talked about loyalty constantly, like how people always leave, how nobody sticks around, how trust is the most important thing. I agreed because I figured she meant normal trust, like not cheating or lying. I had no idea she had a way stricter definition in her head. She invited me to hang out at her place one evening. Her house was quiet and her family barely talked. I remember the way she looked around every room like she was checking who might hear what she wanted to say. It gave me a weird feeling. A couple weeks into dating, she brought up the idea of a loyalty pledge, just casually, like she was asking me to watch a movie. She said couples should promise their dedication every night before sleep so they do not drift apart. I laughed a little because it sounded like something from a weird club. She did not laugh. She stared at me like she was waiting. So I said sure, thinking she meant something simple like good night, I care about you. I was wrong. She wrote an actual pledge on paper. It had lines about commitment, protection, emotional alignment, and prioritizing the relationship above all else. I stared at it way too long. That night, she called me and made me read it word for word before bed. I did it because I did not want to start an argument. She sounded satisfied after, like she checked off a box. I hung up and thought that was the end of it. But the next night she asked again. Then the next night. It became routine. She said if I skipped, it meant I was pulling away. She kept track. If I read a line wrong or hesitated, she told me we would have to start over. I felt stupid, standing there in my room holding a piece of paper and reciting like I was in some strict club. After about a month, she added more lines. She said relationships grow, so pledges must grow too. She handed me a longer version with wording that felt heavy. Stuff about absolute loyalty. Stuff about prioritizing her feelings. I read it anyway. I did not want conflict. She got upset easily, and whenever she felt upset, she said I caused emotional instability between us. That phrase stuck to my brain like gum under a shoe. Sleep used to be my escape, something quiet. Now bedtime felt stressful. She would call late, even if I was tired, and demand the pledge. Sometimes she woke me with messages. If I missed one, She said that meant I did not value us. I started keeping my phone volume high, which ruined my rest. My friends asked why I looked exhausted all the time. I said school was annoying. I did not want to explain that I had basically joined some nightly ritual I did not believe in. Her house always felt tense. I visited sometimes and the walls seemed too close together. She pulled out a notebook where she logged whether I performed the pledge correctly. She wrote notes like lacked enthusiasm or slight hesitation at line 3. I sat there watching her scribble and wondered when affection turned into documentation. She said loyalty should feel like muscle memory. She said if I really cared, reciting would feel comforting. It did not. It felt like pressure squeezing around my head. One night I fell asleep early on accident. I woke up to 10 missed calls and a stream of messages asking where I was. She accused me of abandoning my commitment. She said if I cared, I would wake myself. I apologized, half asleep, and promised to do it right next time. The next day I felt like I had failed a test. She did not smile once during our hangout. It was like being punished by silence. She told me we might have to add morning pledges too. My stomach lurched. I started dreading nighttime. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for the call. I tried to fix my tone so she would not say I sounded tired. But I was tired. I could barely focus at school. Teachers asked why I seemed spaced out. I pretended I was fine. I did not want anyone thinking I was stuck. I still argued with myself inside my head, saying she just cared a lot, that it was not weird, that it would calm down eventually. It did not. She updated the pledge again. This version had parts about removing distractions from our lives. She wanted me to reduce time with friends. She said loyalty should not be divided. I stared at the paper and felt this cold weight in my chest. My friends were not distractions. They were my sanity. But I nodded anyway because arguing took too much energy. I kept telling myself I would deal with it later. Later never came. She started asking questions before the pledge. Where I went, who I talked to, why I laughed at something someone said. She made me explain myself before allowing me to read it. The pledge was becoming permission. One night she said she would not let me sleep until I said every word perfectly. I sat there in the dark whispering lines while my eyes burned. She finally hung up and I collapsed into my pillow. I slept worse than ever. I noticed I changed too. I stopped staying out late. I stopped laughing loudly. I stopped texting people unless she approved. My world shrank into quiet corners and scheduled promises. I was scared to miss anything. My phone felt like a leash. My chest felt tight more nights than not. It was like living with a small invisible rule book pinned to my brain. The breaking moment was stupid. I was at a friend's house watching some trashy movie, and I lost track of time. My phone vibrated nonstop. When I stepped outside to answer, her voice was sharp. She demanded the pledge immediately. I whispered it in a backyard under a faint streetlight. When I stumbled over a word, she made me start over. My friend peeked out the window confused. I finished and hung up, feeling embarrassed and angry at myself. That was the first time I felt actual anger about it, not just tired acceptance. The next morning, she sent a new version of the pledge, even longer. She said relationships evolve, so commitments should too. Reading it made my hands shake. I realized she would keep adding forever. More lines, more demands, more control. I would never sleep normally again. I would never think freely without checking if I was loyal enough. That future terrified me. So I ended it, not with yelling. Just a message that said I could not do this anymore. She tried calling. I did not answer. She sent paragraphs accusing me of betrayal. She said I broke a sacred promise. My chest felt heavy reading it, but deep down there was relief. A door had opened. I blocked the calls and set my phone down. My hands trembled, but I felt lighter. That first night alone felt weird. My room felt too quiet. I waited for the phone to ring, but nothing happened. I closed my eyes and realized I did not have to recite anything. I fell asleep slowly but peacefully. The next few nights took some adjusting. I would wake up halfway expecting a demand. That faded eventually. I started hanging out with friends again. I laughed without checking my tone. I felt like myself again. No nightly rituals. No pressure. Just normal life. Never thought I would get stressed out over something as simple as a journal, but things kind of went in that direction before I even realized it. I first met Tyler at this little coffee spot near the park where I liked to just chill after school. He was the kind of guy who always had way too many bracelets on his wrist and talked like he already figured out the entire world. At first, I thought it was cool because he sounded confident. I was just looking for someone to hang out with, maybe laugh about dumb stuff, maybe get a slice of pizza after class. We started talking, shared music playlists, and it felt normal. Nothing wild. But it slowly shifted. He kept staring at the notebook I carried around in my backpack like it was glowing or something, always asking what I wrote in it. I just called it my diary, even though it was more like scattered thoughts and things I did not want to forget. I thought every person deserved a little quiet space. He told me couples should not have secrets. He said secrets turn into lies. I brushed it off the first time, but every time we hung out, he brought it up again. I kept that diary because my brain felt messy. It helped me sort basic days from bad days, helped me remember old jokes and tiny moments with family. When he asked again, I hesitated, and the look on his face changed completely. Like I did something wrong. He acted like not handing over that notebook meant I was hiding something huge. The next day at the park, he sat next to me on the bench and asked again, but this time he did it while holding onto my backpack. He looked serious, like this was some test. I told him it was just private thoughts, nothing dramatic. He did not care. He said couples should share everything. He said if I trusted him, I would show him. I did not feel right about it. The whole vibe twisted from fun to weird pressure. After that, nothing felt relaxed. Every time I opened the notebook to write, I felt like someone was staring over my shoulder. I did not even enjoy writing anymore. I would catch myself checking my bag each time I set it down, almost paranoid he might grab it. We would sit on the grass, and instead of joking about random stuff, Tyler lectured me about honesty. I tried to explain that privacy is not the same thing as secrecy. He rolled his eyes and said those words only sounded different because I was scared of real commitment. It made me annoyed, but also confused. Part of me wondered if I actually was doing something wrong, but another part of me felt this tight knot in my stomach telling me to be careful. That knot got stronger the longer we were around each other. He started asking who else I wrote about. He asked if I wrote about other guys. He even asked if I wrote about him when we argued. He wanted to know every detail. He would message me late at night asking if I updated the diary that day. I felt like I was babysitting his insecurities. Once, I left my backpack at his place when we went to grab food nearby, and the whole time I was paranoid he might go through it. When we got back, it was in the same spot, but I still checked the zipper. None of this felt like a relationship. It felt like surveillance. I never thought a simple notebook could make me feel trapped. My parents started noticing something was off. They asked why I barely wrote anymore. They asked why I kept checking if my bag was zipped. I did not want to explain because saying it out loud made me sound dramatic. But one afternoon after class, Tyler brought it up again, this time asking in front of two of his friends. He acted like it was some funny story, like I was being unreasonable. They laughed. I felt my face heating up. He tried to play it off, calling it romantic. But it was not romantic. Romantic does not feel like being cornered. That night, I sat at my desk staring at my diary and realized how long it had been since I actually enjoyed writing in it. The turning point was this weekend hangout at the park. We sat under a tree, and he reached for my backpack again. He did not even ask. He just moved his hand toward the zipper like he had the right. I pulled it back. He got mad. He said if I refused again, maybe we should rethink things. I said maybe we should. He froze like he did not think I would actually say that. He got quiet and tried to backtrack, saying he only wanted to understand me better, but I was already done. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked off before he could unpack more reasons. My heart was pounding, but at least I could breathe. A couple days later, he messaged me these long paragraphs about trust and loyalty. He said couples cannot hide themselves. He said private thoughts destroy relationships. I stared at my phone for a while, then closed the messages without replying. I put my phone face down on the desk and opened my diary again. The first line I wrote was that I missed feeling like it was mine. That was the weird thing. I was not even writing anything secret. It was just the feeling of control. I got used to having a quiet corner for my brain. Losing that corner made everything feel too loud. Weeks passed, and sometimes I would see him at the coffee spot. He would glance over but never walked up. I guess he realized the conversation was over. I went back to carrying my notebook normally. I did not treat it like something forbidden. I wrote about the park, the weird stir-fry my mom made one night, a new game I picked up, hanging out with friends. Slowly, everything felt like it used to. I did not feel someone hovering over my shoulder anymore. Randomly, I think about how weird the whole situation turned. It started like any simple thing: sharing playlists, grabbing pizza, laughing on the bench. Then suddenly it felt like he wanted to peel back every layer until there was nothing left just for me. Maybe some people think relationships mean total access, but I think everyone needs a little locked drawer in their head. Privacy is not betrayal. It is just mental breathing room. I guess I learned that the quiet parts matter just as much as the loud ones. Anyway, not everything needs a dramatic ending. We stopped talking. I kept writing. Life moved forward. My backpack feels lighter now, even though it holds the same stuff. I can sit in the park again without that tight knot in my stomach. The notebook is still there, and I still flip through old pages sometimes. Some pages are messy. Some pages are boring. But they are mine. I did not hand them over. I am, but I did not. Sometimes holding on to something small keeps the rest of your life from feeling too big and cramped. That is really it. Nothing more to dissect. I remember the first time I ever walked into this tiny hobby shop on the corner of town. The walls were stacked with all kinds of stuff like old action figures, trading cards, and random gadgets nobody really needed, but everyone kind of wanted. I spent a lot of weekends there digging around for weird things to add to my shelves at home. I do not even know why I got into collecting. Something about staring at rows of things lined up in a certain order felt peaceful. I guess it just made my room feel like my space. Anyway, that was pretty much my vibe the month I met Zainab. I met her at this community soccer field behind the school. My friend dragged me along because they were short on players. She played for the other side. She had the serious look every time she took a shot, but right after she scored, she started laughing like nothing mattered. We got to talking after the game ended. Her house was not far from mine, so we walked home together. She asked what I did for fun. I told her about my collections. Nothing wild, just little things. She smiled and nodded, but I noticed she did not ask many follow-up questions. The next couple of weeks we hung out more. We got sandwiches at this cheap spot that only cost like $6 for a huge sub. We walked through stores and pointed out random stuff. It felt easy. One afternoon, she asked if she had seen my room. I said sure. She scanned my shelves like she was taking inventory. I cracked a joke about how I should probably dust more often. She barely reacted. It was weird, but I brushed it off. She just said interesting, but in this quiet voice like she was judging. A few days later, we met up again at the soccer field. She pulled me aside and asked how serious I was about relationships. I said I was not trying to rush into anything. She frowned. She told me real commitment means not wasting time on distractions. It sounded dramatic, but I nodded. I figured she was just trying to be mature or whatever. She started talking about how hobbies pull people away from each other. She said couples should focus on building a future, not stacking plastic figures on shelves. I did not respond much because I did not want to start something. The more we hung out, the more she poked at it. Every hobby I mentioned, she twisted into a sign of weakness. She would say stuff like if you really wanted this to go somewhere, you would not need silly distractions. I tried to defend it a little, saying collecting made me calm, but she dismissed it like I was talking about chewing bubble gum. I shrugged it off again. Maybe I was just being sensitive. One Tuesday afternoon, I got home from school early. Nobody else was there. I went to my room to drop my bag, opened the door, and froze. My shelves. Empty. Every figure. Every card. Gone. My chest dropped so hard I thought someone robbed the place. I stood there staring at the blank boards like I read the whole room wrong. I sprinted around the house looking for a note or anything. Nothing. My phone buzzed. It was Zainab. She sent a picture of a big trash bin in her driveway. I stared at it, not fully processing. Then a message popped up saying I took care of those distractions. I bolted out of the house so fast I nearly slipped on the porch. I ran all the way to her street. She was standing in her driveway looking proud. I walked to the bin, hands shaking, and slowly lifted the lid. Everything was tossed inside like it meant nothing. Cards bent, figures scratched, cases cracked. Stuff I spent years finding. She said something about how now we can focus on something real. My mind could barely keep up. I remember this warm wave of anger and confusion. I dug through the bin, grabbing whatever I could. She tried to stop me. She said I looked pathetic. I did not listen. I felt like I had to save whatever pieces survived. I dragged everything home in a torn trash bag. For hours, I sorted through the mess on the floor of my room. Some pieces were ruined. Some were salvageable. None of it felt the same. The next morning, she messaged again. She said she did it for both of us. She said if I cared, I would appreciate her sacrifice. Sacrifice. That word clanged in my head like a hammer. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. That afternoon, she showed up at my door uninvited. My mom answered and called me down. When I saw Zainab standing there like everything was normal, something inside me just snapped into clarity. I told her we were done. She asked if this was about toys. Toys. She missed the entire point. She said I was throwing away a future. I said she already threw away something that mattered to me. She scoffed, walked off, and never looked back. I closed the door and leaned on it. My heart pounded, but at least my head was clear. The next few weeks were rough. My room looked like a disaster zone. I spent late nights trying to glue pieces back together. Some items were beyond fixing. I kept them anyway. They reminded me of how fast someone can try to rearrange your life without asking. When I told a couple friends what happened, they stared at me like it was unreal. One friend helped me repair a few things. Another gave me an old figure from when he was a kid just to fill the gap. Little by little, the shelves started to look like my room again. I still went to the hobby shop. The owner asked why I looked stressed. I just said someone messed with my collection. He nodded and handed me a box of old trading cards for $3. I sat in that shop in the back corner sorting cards for an hour. It felt calm again. Sometimes I see her at the soccer field. She never looks over. She hangs around new people now, probably telling them about distractions and commitment. I do not care anymore. I learned something important without anyone giving a dramatic speech. If someone tries to remove pieces of who you are and calls it love, it is not love. It is control. You cannot build something solid on top of someone else's wreckage. Now when I walk into my room, the shelves are not perfect, but they are real. Different items, different stories, some cracked edges. I kind of like them better that way. They feel earned. I go to school, hang out with friends, eat messy sandwiches, and collect whatever weird things catch my eye. Nothing epic. Just days stacked on days, quiet and mine. That is it. Nothing more dramatic happened. Life kept moving and so did I. I always thought dating would be this chill ride where you just hang out and figure each other out along the way. That was what drew me in at first. Logan seemed normal enough when we met at this small diner where the lights were kind of dim and the fries tasted like they had been sitting out for about 3 hours. But the milkshake slapped, so we kept going back. We talked about dumb shows I was reading at the time, and he acted like he was into them too. But then stuff got weird when he introduced this whole idea that we needed to rehearse conversations before meeting his friends. Like he treated it like we were prepping for some game show. At first I kind of laughed it off, but he was dead serious, pacing around his room and going over what topics I should or should not bring up. It felt like handling someone's fragile glass collection. He would correct my tone. He would tweak random things I would say, even stuff as simple as how I described my day. And even though I tried to play it cool, there was this heavy weight that built up every time he texted that we had plans with his crew. His apartment was quiet in a creepy way. No pictures on the walls, just blank white paint and this faint smell of old coffee. He made me practice these lines like we were in some weird drama club. He said he just did not want me to embarrass him. It hit me different because I did not think I was embarrassing at all. He would tell me that his friends were super serious about first impressions. It got to a point where I would sit cross-legged in his living room while he paced in front of me, holding his phone like a clipboard. He would list topics. No talking about my part-time job because he said it did not sound impressive enough. No joking too much because he wanted me to seem mature. It felt like he was sculpting a robot version of me out of thin air and stuffing me inside it. The craziest part was when we actually hung out with them. They sat in this huge living room filled with expensive speakers and a giant TV. I looked around and there was nothing personal. Just stuff that looked like it belonged in a showroom. They talked about their jobs, their goals, and which gym they were training at. I barely spoke not because I was shy, but because everything I said in practice flew out of my head. I tried to remember the lines he drilled into me, but they felt stale and unnatural. I felt like someone shoved me into a stiff costume. The longer it went on, the more my thoughts blurred into white noise. Sometimes one of them would glance at me like they were trying to figure out where I fit. I wondered that too. Logan would lean over to whisper small corrections in my ear while his friends kept talking. Stuff like to sit straighter or not laugh at certain jokes. That whispering made my stomach flip because I felt like I was on display. After we left, he would give me notes like we were reviewing some recorded game. He would say I did good but needed to improve. Improve what though? I was just being me. The notes piled up until I stopped wanting to go. I once told him I would rather just chill at home and maybe live stream some random game or something. He said we needed to maintain appearances or people would think our relationship was nothing serious. It kind of hit me that he cared more about those friends than he ever did about hearing anything real from me. I started noticing I would get jittery hours before we met his friends. I would rehearse alone without him, pacing in my room like some weird imitation of him, hoping I would not get scolded later. That was when I figured out something felt fundamentally wrong. A relationship should not feel like prepping for an interview every weekend. Even when we had downtime, he talked like I was always on probation. He asked if I practiced certain statements before bed. He even corrected how I described small stories from my childhood. I started to think maybe he was rewriting my whole personality. My friends noticed. They asked why I sounded so stiff when I talked. They said I was quieter. One night, I sat on my bed, phone buzzing with another message from Logan about rehearsal, and I read everything I could about controlling behavior. Patterns started lining up like puzzle pieces. Meanwhile, his group of friends kept becoming more judgmental. They laughed about people behind their backs, and I started imagining the things they probably said about me when I was gone. The whole scene made my chest feel tight. One afternoon at his place, he pulled out a notebook with bullet points on how I should talk about hobbies. That was the moment it broke. I looked around at the blank walls, the empty shelves, and realized there was nothing real there. Not about him, not about us. I felt like his trophy, always polished and inspected before placed on display. I told him I could not do this anymore. He stared at me like I just broke some sacred rule. He tried to bargain, offering simpler rehearsals, shorter ones, fewer bullet points. I walked out anyway. He called a bunch. I muted them all. After that, hanging with my own friends felt unreal at first. They laughed naturally. We talked about dumb stuff. No notes. No judging. At the diner where this all started, I ate soggy fries and got a real milkshake, thinking about how wild it is that I ever agreed to that rehearsing nonsense. Months later, I heard the group still met up weekly like some club. I did not miss it. I got used to speaking freely again, joking randomly again, just existing without boxes around every word. Sometimes when I meet new people, I catch myself wanting to rehearse in my head, as if a muscle memory you never asked for. But then I remind myself I do not live like that anymore. If someone does not like the way I talk about dumb shows or burnt fries, then they can find someone else who fits their script. I hang out with people who actually want to know me, not some performance version. That whole chapter feels like stepping outside after being stuck in a silent room. Air hits different. So yeah, dating Logan taught me nothing fancy, nothing poetic. It was just this weird chunk of my life that I walked out of and left behind like a pair of shoes that never fit right. Now I chill with people who do not hand me notes about how to be, and honestly, that is enough. I never really thought much about money before dating Paige. It was just something that moved in and out of my bank account like water. It paid for snacks and games and random fast food nights. I never stacked bills in neat piles or tracked every little thing. Then I started talking to her, and everything changed so fast it felt like a slow slide I did not notice until I hit the bottom. It started normal. We met through a friend. She had sharp eyes that noticed everything. At first I thought that meant she cared. Later I figured out it meant she monitored. We did not live together. I stayed in this small apartment with faded carpet and cabinets that squeaked if you opened them too fast. The rent was $800 a month. My paycheck was not huge, but I covered stuff fine enough. My groceries were basic. My snacks were cheap. Some months I saved a little. Some months I saved nothing. She seemed curious about that. She asked how much I spent in a week. I guessed. She frowned and said guessing was how people burned money. I laughed. She did not. She worked in an office with clean desks and glass panels everywhere. She wore clothes that looked crisp and perfect. When she talked about money, she used words like budgets and percentages. I nodded without really knowing what she meant. She said she could teach me. She said financial health mattered more than anything. I thought learning from her might help. I thought maybe this would make me better. But the lesson ended up being control instead of help. The first time she asked for a picture of my grocery receipt, I thought it was a joke. She texted a few minutes later asking why I bought a brand name cereal instead of the store brand. She sent a picture of a cheaper box. It saved maybe $1. She sounded proud of finding it. I said it was only $1. She said every dollar builds a pattern. I shrugged and said okay. I did not know that was the beginning. She made a spreadsheet. It had columns for every type of purchase. There were colors. Green meant she approved. Yellow meant I needed to justify the purchase. Red meant she said it was wasteful. I did not know what to do with the red ones. I stared at them like bad grades. She asked me to sit on her couch while she reviewed them. She tapped her laptop. She sighed. She asked why I bought gum for $4. I said I liked the flavor. She said that was not a reason. She typed something. I watched her fingers move like they were giving orders. She wanted weekly meetings every Sunday evening. My whole week felt like a slow march for that moment. I would sit at her tiny kitchen table while she showed me charts. My name sat at the top of the sheet. She pointed out where I failed. I nodded and took notes in my head. It felt easier to just agree. My shoulders tensed before I even walked through her door. I did not tell my friends about it. They would not understand why I let this happen. Then she asked to see my account, not just the balance. She wanted access to the transactions. I refused. She said trust flowed both ways. She pressed. I stalled. She finally dropped it, but not really. Instead, she demanded pictures of every purchase. I would stand in the grocery aisle taking a picture with one hand while holding a bag of rice with the other. People walked around me, and I felt weird. She messaged in real time telling me to pick cheaper options. Sometimes she told me to put something back. I did. I heard the cart rattling as I pushed it away, feeling smaller. She suggested I cancel my streaming app. It cost $15 a month. I used it to relax after work. She said I could relax by reading finance books she recommended. I canceled the app. Then I sat on my couch at night staring at blank walls. No shows. Just silence. My brain buzzed with numbers she drilled into me. I slowly stopped hanging out with friends. They liked to grab pizza and snacks after work. Paige said eating out was a trap. She said a single restaurant meal ruined budgets. I repeated her logic even though I missed crust and sauce. When they asked why I stayed home, I said I was tired. I never told them that a spreadsheet hung over my head. She introduced envelopes for cash. She marked each with thick marker. Food, gas, gifts, emergency. She gave me exact amounts. She said once the money was gone, that category was dead until next month. I never liked digging through the envelopes. I felt like a vending machine that ran out of snacks too early. One afternoon, she found an old hoodie at my place. It cost $30. I bought it months before we met. She held it up and looked at the tag. She asked if spending that much made sense when I already owned other hoodies. I said I was cold that week. She said being uncomfortable built character. I did not know how to answer that. She folded the hoodie like she won some argument I never agreed to. Then came the debit card talk. She said she could hold it for me. She would give me cash every week. She said it would protect me from myself. I asked what I needed protection from. She said lack of discipline. She said she cared. I refused. She stared at me long and quiet. The quiet lasted the whole ride home. A few days later, I broke a rule. I went to the store and bought sugary cereal. It cost $5. I liked the taste. It reminded me of watching cartoons as a kid when mornings were simple and breakfast was fun. I did not take a picture. I did not ask permission. I went home and ate a bowl right away. It felt warm in my chest, like waking up. Later, she asked for the receipt. She circled the cereal line and asked me why. I said I wanted it. She said want was not enough. She said I had failed. She typed something on her laptop. That small click of keys felt heavier than anything. It was then I realized she did not want to help me. She wanted to shape my tastes, shape my choices, shape my identity through dollars. That night, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling. My room was quiet. My phone buzzed with messages about wasted money. I read articles online about controlling behavior. Every sentence matched something she did. My fingers twitched. My throat felt tight. I decided I was done. I called her the next morning. My voice did not shake. I said we should break up. She listed all the money lessons I would lose. She said I would fall apart financially. I hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed feeling oddly light. I ordered a pizza with pepperoni. It cost $12. I ate it slice by slice. The cheese stretched, the sauce dripped, and I wiped my fingers on a napkin without shame. Nothing exploded. My bank account did not implode. Later, I bought gum. It cost $2. I chewed it while walking home, the flavor sweet and bright. I watched the streetlights flicker. I felt free. My friends invited me out again. I said yes. We shared fries and sodas. They laughed at random jokes. My shoulders loosened. I did not hear any charts or see any red cells. I got home and checked my account. It was fine. Just an hour. I sat on my couch, opened my streaming app again, and pressed play on a show I've reading for weeks. My room felt softer. My body felt lighter. No spreadsheets. No envelopes. Just me. I met Kevin at this outdoor food spot behind the mall. Tables were old and wobbly. Birds circled like tiny thieves waiting to snatch fries. He sat alone with a book that looked way too heavy for a normal afternoon. I thought he seemed quiet and maybe thoughtful. We talked about basic stuff at first. Work, school, food. He smiled in a calm way. I thought he was the kind of guy who liked chill weekends and long naps. That was true for about 3 days. After that, a different side showed up like a pop-up ad that never closes. The first time politics came up, I barely said anything. I just mentioned something small I read earlier that week. His eyes looked at me like I got a test question wrong. He leaned forward and said serious couples needed identical views. Not similar. Not close. Identical. I laughed at first. I thought he was joking. He was not. He said relationships fell apart when opinions did not match. He said disagreements were threats. He said unity came from copying each other. The words felt heavy and sticky. I did not know what to say, so I shrugged and changed the subject. He changed it back. That became a pattern. We did not live together. He stayed in a duplex on a quiet street where cars went by slowly and dogs barked at nothing. Inside, the walls had posters of leaders and quotes printed in tiny letters. His bookshelf was full of political biographies. The air smelled like old paper and cheap coffee. He had stacks of flashcards on his desk. He flipped through them like preparing for finals. He handed me a stack and said I should memorize them. Each card had talking points. Names, dates, policies, comparisons. I held them and tried not to look confused. He said serious partners spoke in sync. He wanted us to sound the same. He said if I slipped up in public, people would think I did not care about the future. He paced around the room while I sat on his bed reading bullet lists. It felt like studying for a class I never signed up for. When we hung out with his friends, they circled around topics like bees around flowers. They threw names and arguments across the room like dodgeballs. I tried to follow, but everything blurred. When someone asked for my view, I froze. My brain scrambled through flashcards like dropped papers. Then Kevin answered for me. He put words in my mouth. They nodded. I just sat there quietly, feeling more like a ventriloquist dummy than a person. He started scheduling study nights, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. He said commitment meant consistency. We sat in his living room on the carpet. He quizzed me. I fumbled. He sighed. He wrote notes. He said my tone was off. He said I needed more fire. He said passion mattered more than accuracy. I wondered how passion worked when it was manufactured on command. I stopped talking about anything else. Music, food, shows, games. If I drifted toward normal life, he dragged the conversation back to politics. I felt a strange silence growing inside me, like I stopped having original thoughts. My friends noticed. They said I talked like a documentary narrator. They looked at me like I was boring now. I knew I was. I felt like a copy machine printing pages someone else wrote. One afternoon, he brought up a hypothetical scenario. If our views ever drifted apart, would we break up or would I adjust? I said I was allowed to think on my own. He blinked like he did not understand. He said thinking alone was dangerous. He said unity was safety. He said we had to be on the same team. I said being on a team did not mean being clones. He did not answer that. He just started another flashcard quiz. I started hiding my true opinions like snacks in a backpack. At home, I watched random videos about cooking and animals just to feel normal again. I talked to myself quietly, trying to hear my own voice. Sometimes I forgot what it used to sound like. It was strange losing yourself while still technically existing. Things got worse when he asked me to correct friends. If someone said something he disagreed with, he wanted me to jump in and fix them. He said silence meant weakness. He wanted me to debate. I did not want to debate anyone. I liked hanging out without turning every sentence into a battlefield. He pressured me. He texted reminders. He sent long paragraphs about responsibilities. At the grocery store, he called me while I stood staring at apples. He asked if I argued with someone earlier that day. I said no. He said I should have. He listed reasons why silence caused harm. I leaned on the shopping cart, feeling tired in a way sleep did not fix. I bought the apples anyway and hung up without saying goodbye. We went to a small gathering at his friend's apartment. The furniture was modern and stiff. Everyone held cups and talked fast. The subject turned political again. My chest tightened. I waited for Kevin to jump in. Instead, he looked at me. He wanted me to lead. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. People stared. My heart thumped like someone tapping at a door. Kevin whispered the talking points. I repeated them like reading off a broken teleprompter. The conversation moved on, but I felt like a ghost wearing my own body. On the ride home, he said I missed 2 chances to correct someone. He said hesitation was failure. He said doubt was betrayal. The word betrayal echoed in my head like a drop in an empty bucket. I looked out the window, watching streetlights pass like blinking signals. Houses sat quiet and peaceful, not arguing with anyone. I wondered what it felt like to live in one of them, drinking hot chocolate and talking about nothing heavy. By the next week, I woke up feeling hollow. I skipped a study night. He texted repeatedly. I ignored him. He showed up at my apartment door. He held flashcards. I looked at them like they were chains. He asked me to promise that my beliefs would always match his. Not close. Exact. He said that was love. My stomach twisted. I told him love let people think separately. He frowned like I spoke another language. I stepped aside and let him talk. He monologued for 20 minutes. He talked about loyalty, unity, purpose. While he talked, my mind drifted to memories before him. Random jokes at midnight. Dumb memes. Laughing until my stomach hurt. I missed those unedited moments. I missed me. Finally, he paused. I told him I could not do this. He froze. He asked if I understood the consequences. I said the only consequence would be losing myself if I stayed. I walked into the door and closed it softly. He knocked twice more. I stayed quiet. Eventually, the hallway went still. Inside, I sat on my bed. The silence felt like clean air. I grabbed my phone and opened old messages with friends. Their jokes felt warm. I sent a few replies. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Later that night, I tossed the leftover flashcards into a drawer. Papers fluttered like tired birds. I lay back and listened to nothing. No lectures. No quizzes. Just quiet. I felt my voice returning like a song I forgot the melody to but could hum again if I tried. I went out with friends a few days later. We sat on cheap chairs under flickering diner lights. We talked about fries and random gossip. Nobody corrected anyone. Nobody scored points. It felt real. I laughed. It sounded rusty but natural. At home, I stood in front of a mirror. I said something about movies. Something about music. Something about silly things. Hearing my own thoughts without approval felt strange but nice, like wearing an old hoodie that still fit. I did not reach out to Kevin again. He sent long messages about loyalty. I deleted them. I blocked him. I breathed. Now when people bring up politics, I listen. I share when I want. I do not memorize scripts. I do not debate strangers at parties. I do not study flashcards on the carpet. Thoughts can grow on their own. Voices sound better when they are real. I met Roxy at this late-night arcade spot where the lights were loud colors and the air smelled like old pizza grease. I was there with 2 friends trying to beat this racing game that always cheated at the last second. She sat on a stool watching people play, kicking her feet like she was bored of everything. We talked a little, and she seemed cool at first. Funny, fast, chill. I noticed she stayed out super late without yawning once. I figured she was just one of those night people built different. I did not think it mattered. It started mattering real fast. We did not live together. I stayed in a small apartment where the hallway light flickered sometimes like I could not decide if electricity was worth it. My room was kind of messy, laundry piles acting like furniture. I slept early on weekdays because work drained me. Roxy said she thought nights were when brains did their best thinking. She said sleep was boring. I shrugged because everyone has weird takes. I did not know I was signing up for mandatory night shifts at nothing. The first week dating her felt normal. Texting, hanging out, watching random videos on the couch. Then she started commenting on my bedtime. She said I disappeared too early. She said healthy relationships sleep at the same time. I said I got tired. She said tired was mental. She said I could be stronger. I did not want to argue, so I stayed awake later. At her place, the lights stayed on all night. Bright. Buzzing. Her walls were covered in posters of bands I never heard of and neon paint that glowed like some radioactive cave. She would sit cross-legged on her bed rambling about cool dreams she had as a kid. I barely heard half of it because my eyes felt like sandpaper. Around 2 in the morning I would drift. Then she would nudge me and say no sleeping. At first it was playful. Then it got serious. She repeated that couples needed synchronized clocks. She said mismatched sleep meant drifting apart. She said if I slept before her, it meant I cared less. I asked how that made sense. She gave a long explanation that circled around itself like a bike wheel stuck in mud. I pretended to follow. I felt pressure settle on my chest every time the nighttime arrived. Work got harder. My manager started pointing out small mistakes. I nodded and promised to focus. My brain felt foggy. On lunch break, I closed my eyes for 2 minutes. It felt like falling into a pit. When I opened them, my heart raced like I got caught stealing something. Most nights, around midnight, I tried sneaking to bed. She would call, or not have the chat nonstop. If I ignored it, she sent long messages about how couples who cared stuck together through the night. One time I said I needed sleep. She silent treated me for a whole day. My stomach twisted the whole time. When she finally messaged again, she said I could do better. I apologized even though I did not know why. She started coming over without warning. She would drag beanbags into my room and lay there talking about shows, food, dreams, theories about how daylight wasted potential. She turned up my lights so bright the shadows ran away. When my voice got low, she tapped my forehead with her finger and told me to stay up. She acted like sleep was weakness. My friends noticed the bags under my eyes. They joked I looked like a raccoon that lost a fight. I laughed weakly. They invited me to hang out on Saturday mornings. I kept saying no. I slept through half the day, then woke up groggy and behind on chores. My laundry pile gained new territory like a slow invasion. My parents called on a Sunday afternoon. They asked if I was eating right. I said sure. They asked if I was sleeping right. I hesitated. I said sort of. They said I sounded different. I brushed it off. I hung up feeling weird, like someone flashed a light on a messy corner I was avoiding. One night at her place, I fell asleep accidentally. My head just tipped back and everything went dark. I woke up to her shaking my shoulder. She asked why I gave up. Gave up what? She paced the room saying couples rise and fall together. She turned on music loud enough to keep my heart awake. The beat rattled the walls. I sat there blinking slow. After that, she made rules. No sleeping until she did. If she thought I looked tired, she would make me stand up and walk around her room. If I closed my eyes for too long, she tapped my cheek. It stopped feeling cute. It started feeling like detention. My dreams shrunk down to tiny flash glimpses I barely remembered. My mind started acting weird. I would forget simple words. I dropped things. My head felt stuffed with cotton. At work, I almost walked into a shelf because my eyes blurred. My manager pulled me aside and asked if something was going on. I said I was fine. I was lying. At home, when the clock hit midnight, my dread kicked in. She would text asking if I was ready to stay awake. I stared at my bed like it was forbidden fruit. I wanted to collapse. One night, my body just shut down. I do not remember when I fell asleep. Somewhere between messages and blinking. My phone buzzed nonstop. When I woke up at 3 in the morning, I saw her angry texts. Walls of them. She said I broke trust. She said I abandoned her. My chest thumped. I apologized half awake. She said apology was not enough. She demanded a video call. We talked until the sun came up. I stumbled into work tired enough to float. My friends finally confronted me. They asked why I sounded like a zombie. They said I was not fun anymore. They said I missed everything. Hearing that felt like being slapped awake. I went home and stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes were puffy. My shoulders slumped like wet laundry. I barely recognized myself. I looked at my bed. I sat on it. Something inside me sparked. I lay down. My phone buzzed. I turned it face down. The buzz kept going. Then it stopped. Silence felt heavy and priceless. I did not move. The next morning, messages stacked high. She said we needed to fix our sleep schedule together. Together meant follow hers. She wanted to plan nights minute by minute. She said drifting apart at bedtime was the first step to breaking up. I read her words again and again. They felt like rope tightening around my thoughts. That afternoon in our place, I tried to talk calmly. I said people have different rhythms. I said sleep should not be punishment. She argued back, pacing like a storm cloud. She said sync was love. I said freedom was breathing. She did not get it. The argument looped until we hit the same sentence over and over like a scratched disc. Finally, I stood up. My knees felt weak. I said I could not do this. Her face froze like she got unplugged. She did not chase me down the stairs. The hallway air tasted cleaner than her room. Outside, the sun felt too bright, but real. Walking home, cars passed by slow. Kids chalked the sidewalk. People watered plants. They all existed on different schedules. None of them were arguing about bedtimes. The world did not collapse. At home, I pulled my blankets around me and slept for 10 hours. When I woke, my brain felt like freshly washed dishes instead of sticky leftovers. I stretched and felt bones crack in a satisfying way. My phone showed more messages. I deleted them without opening. Days went by. I slept when I was tired. I woke when I was done. My friends looked relieved. We sat at a diner and ate pancakes while laughing about dumb stuff. My shoulders loosened when nobody yelled at me for yawning. Sometimes late at night, I stare at my bed and think about how something that simple got stolen from me for a while. I climb under the blankets anyway. My brain does not panic now. It just drifts. Dreams taste sweeter. No more forced wakefulness. No more demands. No more tapping my cheek because I blinked too slow. I learned that sleep is not a loyalty test. It is just sleep. And I am allowed to have it. I met Olivia at a gym on a slow Tuesday evening. The place smelled like rubber mats and cheap disinfectant. I was finishing a light workout. She noticed me comparing 2 protein bars. She walked over and said most bars were marketing. She spoke with certainty. I nodded. She said she cared about fitness more than anything. I said I liked staying healthy. That answer hooked her. We started talking and exchanged numbers. We did not live together. My apartment was quiet and a little cluttered. I cooked simple meals. I did not count calories. I did not weigh food. I ate when hungry. The first week dating her was calm. She texted workout tips. She shared recipes that looked okay. Then she asked for pictures of my meals. I sent them. She critiqued portions. She circled items on screenshots. She sent long paragraphs about macros. The tone sharpened. She invited me to her place for dinner. Her fridge held rows of containers labeled with dates. Everything was measured. The kitchen scale sat like a judge on the counter. She served chicken, broccoli, and rice. Bland. She watched me chew. She asked how it tasted. I said fine. She said taste did not matter. She said discipline was flavor. I swallowed quietly. Over time, she called my snacks brand damage. She claimed my body type reflected on her reputation. She trained clients at the gym. She said dating someone without precision eating made her look unfocused. She asked me to stop buying bread. She said grain slowed me down. I rolled my eyes in private. Bread made meals comfortable. She created a weekly menu. Monday was chicken. Tuesday was turkey. Wednesday was fish. Vegetables rotated. Carbs were controlled. She sent calendar invites. She checked if I followed. If I deviated, she sent disappointed messages. She said consistency proved loyalty. I read them on my couch while chewing a simple sandwich, feeling rum for enjoying it. She started attending my grocery trips. She scanned labels, shook her head, and placed items back. She replaced them with versions that tasted like cardboard. She muttered about sodium levels and sugar traps. I pushed the cart silently. Other shoppers walked freely, grabbing chips and cookies. I stared at them like rebels. At restaurants, she spoke for me. She ordered grilled items without seasoning. She asked servers to remove sauces. She asked how things were cooked. She sent plates back if they looked greasy. People stared. My ears burned. She said embarrassment was a test of growth. I poked dried chicken with a fork. Late at night, hunger hit like a wave. I opened my fridge, found lettuce and plain yogurt, and wanted to scream. I remembered the taste of cereal and fries. Memories acted like perfume from another life. I drank water instead. At the gym, she inspected my form. She told me which machines to avoid. She added sets. She said sweat was proof of love. I wiped my forehead and nodded. My arms shook. She smiled like a coach watching a player break limits. Friends invited me out for burgers. I made excuses. They asked why I was shrinking from social stuff. I shrugged. I did not want to face pictures of meals and scolding paragraphs later. My stomach felt light and annoying all day. One afternoon, she grabbed my waist gently and said progress was slow. She squeezed like testing fruit. She recommended cutting dairy. She said bloating was reputation rot. I stared at the wall behind her and thought about melted cheese on warm crust. I nodded like a puppet. She added weigh-ins every Sunday. I stepped on the scale. She wrote numbers in her notebook. She circled trends. Her pen moved with authority. I felt like livestock. She asked what snacks I snuck. I said none. She narrowed her eyes. She said honesty was fuel. I stayed silent. Sleep became restless. My stomach gurgled. I imagined vivid meals. Pizza dripping cheese. Pasta swirling in sauce. Fries stacked like golden bricks. I woke up hungry and thirsty. I drank cold water that tasted like disappointment. At her place, she meal prepped while lecturing. The containers clicked shut like cages. She said control meant success. She gave me 3 containers to take home. I thanked her. My voice sounded flat. On the walk home, I smelled someone grilling onions. My steps slowed. My heart twisted. Work productivity dipped. My manager noticed. I yawned often. I thought about food constantly. My brain felt foggy. When coworkers ate donuts, I looked away like watching crime. One offered me half. I declined. My stomach begged. She introduced progress photos. I stood against a blank wall. She took pictures from angles. I stared ahead. She zoomed in, analyzing. She pointed at slight softness. She said we could fix it. The word fix punched my chest. Friday night, friends held a small party. I went. They'd offered chips and dip. I shook my head. They stared. I told them about my diet. They called it strict. I shrugged. They whispered when I walked to the bathroom. My throat tightened. On the way home, hunger roared. My phone buzzed. Olivia asked if I ate anything off plan. I lied. She congratulated me. The praise felt cheap. I crunching on air instead of chips. Saturday morning, she brought new supplements and lecture sheets. She said I should eliminate fruit. Too much sugar. She said sweet meant savatage. I thought about apples and berries like old friends banished from town. Afternoons blurred. Gym. Container meals. Water. Sleep. Repeat. I watched my reflection shrink. My cheeks hollowed. I lost color. My smile became rented. One night, the hunger hit harder. I sat at my kitchen table staring at containers. The chicken looked tired. The broccoli slumped. My stomach cried. I grabbed my keys and walked to a corner store. I bought a chocolate bar. It cost $2. I held it like treasure. Back home, I unwrapped it. The smell alone felt like a hug. I took a bite. Sweetness spread across my tongue. My eyes closed. Warmth, relief, life. Halfway through, guilt slammed. I threw the rest away. I leaned over the sink, breathing heavy. Chocolate still lingered like evidence. I washed the wrapper. Ridiculous. The next day, Olivia noticed my energy spike weirdly. She squinted. She asked if I cheated. I denied. She studied my face. She said sugar puffiness was visible. She added more cardio to my plan. My legs ached. Weeks passed. My personality shrank. Food ruled my mind. Conversation collapsed to macros. Friends stopped inviting me out. I missed laughing. I missed fries. I missed myself. The turning point came when she brought a printed contract. A diet contract. She wanted me to sign. It listed rules. Forbidden foods. Approved foods. Punishments. No restaurant meals. Weekly photos. Monthly body checks. Quarterly measurements. My jaw hung. I set the paper down. I looked at her posters, containers, scale, blender, notebook. Everything revolved around body shape. I saw how small her world was, and she was dragging me in. I told her no. My voice was calm. She blinked like her software crashed. She asked if I cared about her reputation. I said my body was not advertising space. She argued loudly. Words piled and toppled. I did not bend. I walked out. The air outside felt cold and honest. Street lights hummed. Cars passed. People ate ice cream. They laughed. Back home, I ordered a burger. It cost $10. It arrived warm and messy. Juice dripped. Cheese melted. I ate slow. Every bite tasted like rebellion. My stomach cheered. The next morning, I blocked her. I threw away containers. I scrubbed my counter free of lecture crumbs. I bought fruit, apples, bananas, oranges. Bright colors returned to my fridge. Work felt normal again. Friends joked about my escape. We shared fries. The salt lit my brain. I leaned back and exhaled. Now I eat balanced meals. I snack when hungry. My body feels like mine. Not a logo. Not a mirror. Just me.